The fact that it's like, you're going to Ferrari, like a boyhood dream. You can't even crack a smile. Like, clearly this is because it's raining and his Ferrari's on slicks and he's already like, shit, what have I done? Hello everybody and welcome to the Blatantly Biased Racing Podcast, and happy Inauguration Day, even though this isn't probably coming out until tomorrow. How are you guys? We're joined obviously by someone better than Casual as usual. Sorry, I should have said that earlier. Mobile and Casual. How are you guys?
Pretty good. How are you, Mobile?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's a pleasure to be here just so Jason could get a sense of what he'd look like if he had a beard.
That is... Jesus, yeah. If you're not seeing double in anyone watching this, we've just invited a Snapchat filter of me to...
I'm going to change my Twitter bio right now.
Yeah.
For anyone interested and who enjoys this discussion, by the way, please do head over to Mobile Chicane's YouTube channel. We'll leave a link in the description below. It's really interesting if you're into history and that kind of thing. Even though I don't think we're talking about history today. So, but yeah, subscribe.
Yeah,
anyway.
we're talking about future. If you talk about history, we go to his channel.
True.
We're doing the opposite of history. Future.
Yeah,
it's all on the same timeline, isn't it? Time is just a construct. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. So, Casual, as always, you plan these things and none of us listen.
Yeah.
Where are we starting?
So this time around, we are predicting how the respective intra-team driver rivalry is going to go. That was a tongue twister. Too late for me in the day. It's been a tiring day, by the way. Yeah, a lot of it. Hey, my dad watches it sometime. Don't do that.
Sorry, Mr. Casual. So we're going to start with Red Bull, I'm guessing then. I think we should start at the front. Give the people what they want.
Let's just go about it randomly, to be honest. Let's let Mobile pick it up. Mobile, which team do you want to talk about? And why is it Sauber?
I didn't come here for responsibility. Sauber, why not?
Why? Sauber of all. Oh, God.
I mean, someone has to. Get the bad part out of the way early.
It's true, yeah. All right, so who's starting? This is the worst put together podcast in the world. I mean, this is truly terrible. If you hate this podcast, please subscribe. Sauber, so we have Bortoleto and Hülkenberg this year, right?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, of course. So, Mobile, go for it. First of all, what do you expect? First of all, let's talk about Bortoleto a bit, because there are a few who have a very positive perception of him. And then there are others who are, and I can understand that, Formula 2 has been a bit of a bitch, to be honest, in the last few years, where you really don't know what the hell is going on. What's your perception of Bortoleto until now?
It's hard to get a sense of perspective from Formula 2, like you say, because, we've got, other people we'll talk on later on, like the likes of Antonelli and Behrman stepping up, who comparatively did not have such a good time in F2, a lot lower kind of down the standings. But I don't think there's a lot of people who would disagree that they don't belong in F1. They should be there. And then comparatively, you have those more at the front who, again, like I say, Bortoleto, the champion, but a little late kind of getting his confirmation to be stepping up this year. I don't follow the junior series as kind of closely as other people do. I just don't have the time, but I'm always reading the results and checking who's who and what's kind of going on. And, this is another guy who, if you look at his CV, he is in the kind of same mold as like a Leclerc or a Piastri, in that he's won back-to-back F3 and F2 titles, I think both in his rookie season as well. But we don't hear too much about him, which I think is kind of interesting, that there's not so much kind of hype being built around in that way. It's difficult to get a sense of perspective of how he's going to be going this year. Obviously, he's not even done any free practice sessions or anything like that, so we've got no kind of yardstick to gauge where he's going to be at. Sauber is an interesting proposition to be jumping in. He's in a multi-year contract there at least, so he's got time to bed in, and then we can get into Audi next year and see kind of what goes with that. You've got to hope that Sauber is going to be a lot better coming into this year than they were last year. I think a lot. Something we're going to talk about, I think, a lot today is that mix between focus on who's looking at 25 and who's looking at 26. And obviously a lot of that preparation for that team is going to go to 26 when it becomes Audi. But they did kind of almost so much damage to themselves last year by the way they kind of fell back and made themselves such an unappealing prospect to a lot of people, that they do kind of need to be making a push forwards this year, at least, to be getting more into the fight for points. And if they can do that, then it'll be interesting to see where Bortoletto's at. Otherwise, we're facing a proposition of where we can only really compare him to Hulkenberg, which is a very big yardstick to be compared to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm always a little bit concerned when we get like a rookie who comes in at the back of the grid, because Formula One can be really unforgiving. And you could have someone who comes in and does a spectacular job in their rookie season at the back of the grid, but because it's so hard to show off where you are, you kind of get lost in the weeds there and then never really make your way up the grid anywhere else. And Bortoletto coming to Sauber, dropping his affiliation to McLaren, even though there's technically no space there at the moment, I think is a bit risky. But I do think there's a couple of things going for him. One, obviously, he's just coming off the back of F2 championship, so he should have a bit of confidence. And I think what will help this situation is, unlike, for example, when we had two absolutely terrible drivers in Haas of Schumacher and Mazepin.
Nikita Mazepin.
Yeah, I think the good thing for Bortoletto coming into the season is that he's not stuck alongside, let's say, a useless Valtteri Bottas or a useless Guan Yu Zhou, just upsetting some fan bases quickly as quick as I can here. But what I mean by that is those two haven't been performing where everyone wanted them to over the last couple of seasons, at least. Bottas at least since 2022, and most of that's down to the car. But I think the problem is, if he had to come in against those guys who weren't performing and perhaps got beaten by one of them in his rookie season, even if it was Valtteri Bottas, that could be the end. Or even if it was close, head to head between them over the season. Whereas I think coming in against someone like Hulkenberg, who at the moment is quite highly rated after what he's just done in Haas, he's the new guy there as well. I think it's a good benchmark, and it means that if he at least performs close to Hulkenberg, or if he beats him, I think that will help him get out of that kind of rut of being at the back end of the grid, where perhaps he may not get a point over the course of the whole season if Sauber's form continues. Because I think otherwise, if he didn't get a point, that's hard to kind of sell yourself up the grid or stick around for long as a rookie. Formula One is just so unforgiving that way. Especially when we just had like Colapinto, for example, come in. I know that Williams was in that position, but Logan Sargent struggled to get points. Colapinto came in and kind of showed what he can do. I think Bortoletto needs to do that, or at the very least be on par with Hulk. I think that will be, helpful. I'm expecting Hulk to do really well, by the way. I don't think any of us care about that. We're like, he'll be fine.
Yeah. I think the biggest question mark for me is, again, we'll get to the more detailed bit. McLaren letting a reigning rookie F3 and F2 champion just go. He's out, and he's not part of the McLaren driver academy anymore. He joined for a year and he's done. And that kind of makes me think that maybe, again, he's had access to the simulators and everything, so they know the data behind the scene, what goes on. And there's something that they've seen that they've probably not thought that, okay, unlike an Oscar Piastri, this is maybe not the kind of prospect or something that they could actually nurture into something big. And that's something that makes me a bit skeptical about where Bortoletto lies in terms of how he's.
Just you're. I was just going to ask, because you're a guy who follows the junior series a lot more than I do. Would your concern continue over, just for myself and listeners who don't follow it as much either? Is your concern also laden in the fact that everyone's talking about F2 as like it's a mixed up grid, so we don't really know where these drivers are? Does that play into it as well? Yeah,
that's also there. Look, there are a few things that you can pick up in terms of. Look, there's one thing that was quite clear, and that was that the car that he had, it was a rocket ship. There were some key facets you can just pick up that F2 is not a spec series. Again, everyone can say whatever the fuck they want. It's just a poorly run series where quality control does not matter, honestly. There are two Mechachrome power units which could be basically, they could differ in terms of output by a massive margin, and you could see it. It's too obvious. In terms of being very, you can say, matured, and the way he handled, the way he conducted his races, you could see that there's something there. And again, this is something you saw with, I think, probably a more erratic and blunt version of Sergio Perez, who if he has the pace, he is able to, conduct himself well and win and basically capitalize on the pace. That's what he used to do. I think Bortoleto has that under him. I don't exactly know how good he is. Again, he was against Kushmani from India. In the beginning, both of them were quite close, and then the gap just widened. And was it because he just got hold of the car and completely obliterated him, or there was something else? We don't know. But you could see that for his age, I think he's 21. He's not that old, and this was his rookie season. Before that, he won Formula 3 in his rookie season as well. And again, according to Peter, even then the car was a bit of a suspect cars apparently. So,
Okay.
but so what is he the real deal? I don't know. But in the last few years, the kind of champions that we've had from F3, F2, they've not really been they, it's very hard to take a call on him.
Yeah.
And the fact that McLaren is ready to let him go, I think that's the biggest. Again, Alonso rates him highly because he manages him. It's obviously, according to him, he's the best rookie prospect, better than Antonelli and Behrman. So
Yeah.
that's something.
And he's South American, which is always good, just like Checo.
I mean, that joke never gets old, right?
No.
I think long after Marco is gone, I think we'll still continue to use that.
I
one.
think when they're burying him, I'm going to post like goodbye to another South American.
Yeah.
Germany's in South America, right? Most of the
If you call
Germans are.
if you call Argentina Germany, then yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's a different. That's a subject for a different podcast. Anyways, I think he is more of a steady hand. He should be a basically someone who spends his first season alongside Hülkenberg, gets used to the car. It's the second year where everything matters because he'll be an Audi driver, and if he's still not caught up with Hülkenberg, that's where the problem starts.
Yeah.
That's the kind of you can say the dynamics that would be there.
So my assumption is just given that Hülkenberg's quite adaptable, apart from tires in the early 2010s, but apart from that, he's been a very quick, very adaptable driver throughout the midfield. He's going into a team that kind of has a shit car. Let's just put it out there. Does anyone here think that Bortoletto's going to beat Hülkenberg this season? I don't. I think Hulk's going to have the upper hand from the get go.
I think Hulk should comfortably have the upper hand. In my view, he was one of kind of the top 10 drivers in the field for me last year. He performed very well in kind of in the midfield, and he was very consistent as well, which I think I always earmark from looking at how good someone is.
Yeah.
He scored a fair chunk of points, but the amount of times he was either sitting in 11th or 12th or something like that as well, in and around the points all of the time in what is kind of a team with such a very small budget. Yes, there are reasons they were kind of elevated a little further up the field at points last year. There were problems with, well, we've said Sauber was struggling. Williams were kind of more focusing on stabilising rather than having a peaky kind of car, and Alpine were having their own kind of stuff, and getting rid of a Logan Sargent at some point as well.
Yeah.
But Hülkenberg is a steady hand. It's good to see him getting sort of another, jump into a factory team. We had that kind of brief time at Renault that didn't quite work out for him. Whether he can stay along at Audi long enough to kind of see the benefits of this kind of jump to him is going to be interesting. He is getting on in some ways, and while age isn't quite the same kind of consideration it has been previously, just got to look at Alonso. You wonder whether Hülkenberg is, and Lewis as well. You wonder how long Hülkenberg is going to hold on there. But this year, he's going to be the one they're depending on for points and for leading the team. Bortoletto, I still think, can be quite decent. To kind of counter what you said, Cash, about being let go from McLaren, I don't think there's necessarily a lack of faith in his talents, but if you consider the lineup that McLaren have, they want to be keeping hold of that for a long time. And the only reason that's going to change is if someone is poached or if there is an implosion there, which could happen. And I think we'll touch on that later as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, the flip side of that is that Sauber used to have this great reputation of being such a great kind of breeding spot for young talents like, well, Raikkonen and Massa are kind of sort of some of the class examples of that. But in more recent years, we've seen Giovinazzi's there and Guan Yu Zhou's there, and they've not really kicked on at all. They've sort of just been kind of those more anonymous midfielders. So you hope Bortoleto isn't going to be, case number 3 of that, but...
No, he's not. He's good.
But he's decent, but let's see how it goes. But yeah, I think Hulk comfortably has the advantage there.
Yeah.
That's something actually I didn't think about. It's going to be interesting to see how Audi develops now a junior program as well, because obviously Ferrari's no longer using that Sauber as its junior seat like Mercedes does with Williams. They're obviously using Haas, but Haas is going... That's another thing as well. Haas get closer to Toyota over time. Sauber's going to Audi. Ferrari could be the team that ends up...
Cadillac.
I suppose junior program would be Cadillac. But then if they build their own engine, where does Ferrari put its juniors? That's going to be an interesting thing.
So that's the entirely new ecosystem that will be there, because there will be 6 different OEMs, essentially.
Yeah.
And that changes Formula One in different ways.
So, just before we move on to a different team, anyone think Sauber is going to be anything less than absolutely dog shit this year?
Yeah, I think so. I think it should be better.
Really?
The kind of... again, it's entirely based on the kind of interview Binotto gave, and it's hard to trust him after the kind of shit he pulled at Ferrari, but according to him, and there seems to be logic to it, as soon as Andrea Seidel joined and Audi supposedly started buying into Sauber, there was 0 resources that was actually provided by the Quinn housing. From that point, it just completely... The team was it was stalled, frozen. Nothing was happening, and until Binotto joined, and he basically implored the Audi that if you want to make this thing work, you have to put in the resources. And that's where the Qatar buying 30% share in Audi. That's how the whole thing happened. That's where a chunk of money is going to come and has been coming in. And I think that's why we saw the upgrades later in the season, and ultimately they scored a few points with Joe, not Bottas, by the way. So there is hope, and Binotto is at least one thing, he's a good engineer, and I think Jonathan Wheatley's joining the team by March, if I'm not wrong.
It's either March.
He's joining
or May,
very
right?
early.
Yeah, earlier than
he's
scheduled,
getting an
but
early
yes.
release.
Yeah.
And you could see...
Early release just sounds so funny, by the way. He's leaving the prison at Red Bull in Milton Keynes.
Yeah. Look, at some point, jobs used to be called prisons in some places.
It's a life sentence, yeah.
Yeah. So from there, I think there could be some... There is scope for improvement. The resources are going to come now. And once resources start flowing in... Look, the facilities at Hinwil, they are world class. They've always been there. Thanks to the kind of money that was put in by Mercedes and McLaren, actually, long back in 2001,
BMW, right?
When Kimi was bought by Ron Dennis at that time. So
BMW invested heavily in...
They did as well.
At one point as well, right?
Yeah.
No, BMW didn't invest in Williams. They invested in Sauber, because Sauber essentially turned into BMW.
Sure, sorry, yes. And then Peter Sauber bought it back. Ugh,
I mean,
what a weird team history that's had. Yeah.
That team has gone through a lot.
It's nice to see that you're a bit more optimistic since Trump took office. Mobile, do you think it's going to be dog shit, or any optimism?
I think it has to be better for them this year, because they don't have an excuse. I think.
Is this Trump or Sauber? Sorry.
A little bit of both. I'll keep talking and you work out what point I venture off from Trump or into Sauber.
Buy the Trump token for whatever it is.
Melania coin. Melania coin.
Oh yeah, even that's out.
Anyway, sorry.
That's right. But yeah, I think the stock of Sauber took such a nosedive last year. I think that was really kind of critical for them, because at the end of the day, it's fucking Audi, right? It's such a big, iconic brand. It should be bringing all sorts of kind of talent into that operation. But the way that they fell back so far to the back of the grid, and there's taking on a project and then there's taking on this kind of project, is a totally different thing from, like I said, when BMW took over, Sauber were kind of more in a kind of safely ensconced to the midfield. So it wasn't too far from there to push to podiums and to the championship. Whereas from the back, it's so much worse. If we're having this conversation 12 months previously, it was a no-brainer that, Carlos Sainz was probably going to go there because the links that his father had there and the money they were investing and all that sort of stuff. The fact that they were, the fact that they were able to make it such an unenticing project that he has gone to Williams of all places, and this is coming from a Williams fan, it's kind of ridiculous in a way. In the same way that even like an Ocon didn't want to touch it at all, and they've now got
you went to Haas,
instead of wanting to take on this kind of thing. So yes, the driver kind of lineup is locked in for 25 and 26 now, so there's not something they need to worry about enticing. But if they want to be bringing in top-level talent on the engineering side and the technical side, they need to be showing that they're pushing forward now, so they're in a better place to start from as Audi, and then be showcasing that when we are Audi, this is now what's going to happen, and this is the plan that's coming into place.
Yeah. It does seem, honestly, the way they've gone about it, Audi until now, they had such great potential if they started investing from 2022. Just imagine where they would be by now. It's completely, they're going to make a fool. They're going to be utter shit in 2026, honestly. I'm telling you right now. They're going to be right at the back of the grid. Cadillac is going to lap them again and again. And why? Because you don't take F1 for granted. That's what I'm just honestly.
I'm hopeful for the people of Volkswagen that there's not a recession in 2026, because genuinely, like, that is going to be. We all know, like, boards and manufacturers, which is my big concern lately about Formula One being so into getting manufacturers. We all know as soon as there's any trouble in the global economy, F1 is like the first thing to go. Like, remember in 2009. They just all upped and left, bar a few that got teams cheaply. So imagine if
right now it won't be that big a problem, honestly.
But imagine if right now this was how we remembered Audi. Like, imagine if at the end of 2025 recession hits, they sell the team, and our remembrance of Audi was that time that they had Sauber for 2 years and did fuck all with it and then left. Like, it could end up that way. Which, it's just you're right. It seems like such a waste. Like, it seemed like from the moment they bought it, it was almost like Elon buying Twitter. Sorry to go back to American politics. But, like, they put this massive amount of money in. They did this whole, like, we're going to get this. We're going to fucking destroy F1. We're going to fix free speech. All this big thing that Audi is going to... Okay. I know, I'm joking. But Audi, we're going to do. And then over
from here and half of the people are zoning out.
Yeah, anyways. But, it seemed like then for, like, 2 years... It was almost like I'm not sure if we want to buy this anymore, and they just that stall. And I think they're going to really regret doing that because, like, even Matthias said, realistically, we're looking at 2030 before we are kind of at the front. And that's a big lead time for, like, I know
5
that's,
years.
Yeah, and look, that's probably a reasonable time for any F1 team to try and get from one place to the other. If we look over history, like, that's an intense project, but it's a reasonable one. But, like, for a company like Audi, and again, I hope the board have kind of let go and really given Mattia control, because a board won't wait 5 years. They'll say fine now, but, like, every quarter where there's no uptick and no gains from it, it's going to be more and more into that kind of, well, can we not just keep the branding and kind of get someone else to run
There's
it,
a difference, by the way, right now. The difference is that they are not spending as much money. Other than the driver salaries, which are, I think, utterly nonsense the way they are going right now. You compare that with the overall expenditure is what? I think 200. What's the value? 200 million or 250 million, something like that. That's your operating overall.
At least
something. Like that, yeah.
It might increase a bit in 2026 because development and stuff, and they also, you have to factor for inflation, but it's not something that's as big as it used to be. Plus, it's right, at least for now. I don't know what happens with inflation, but at least for now, it's still a profit-making entity. That's why they are joining. They're not really, and 250 million is something. Look, you get 100 million from Qatar, that's 100 million gone. That's you get 150 from basically any crypto or something. That's it, and you run the team. It's not that tough right now in terms of getting that money.
So what you're saying is we're going to see Sauber coin halfway through the year, and
Sauber coin,
and then
Binotto coin.
Yeah, and then we're going to have the Audi CEO streaming live on Kick for the first half of the season.
We might.
Let's stop talking about Sauber. Can we jump somewhere more exciting?
Honestly. Yeah. Let's talk about more
Red Bull. I want to jump to Red Bull. Let's give the people what they want, right?
Yeah.
So, I
speak.
Okay, look, Lawson and the way they ran this whole thing of getting Lawson really pissed me off last season, right? I talked about this a good bit, which was like, you know, clearly as soon as they got rid of Ricciardo in the way they did, they were prepping Lawson for the seat. But then Lawson's kind of attitude with Perez halfway through the season tells me he's going to kind of fold under pressure with Verstappen quite quickly. I do think he'll be better off in terms of his driving style, just being that little bit closer to Verstappen's. But like, how quickly is that pressure going to mount when he was, remember, stressing out in the car at like Perez trying to overtake him and the two of them
Yeah,
fighting?
that was a bit weird. I think it was Mexico.
Yeah, there was a couple of races. But like, if he's under that pressure now, I'm just wondering, I'm so concerned about Red Bull because I just think, one, the car is probably not going to be the fastest. It's probably going to be third or fourth. The good news is I think the group will be close, so Verstappen will be able to kind of work his magic. But if they're under pressure where Verstappen is struggling, so all of the attention goes to him to try and seal the title, even if Lawson's like 2/10 off in that group, that could put him like at the back of all of the other cars.
Easily.
Apart from Lewis, obviously, who'll be down in P20 while Charles is on pole. But we'll talk about that later. But, you know, like, I just think it's going to be a shitstorm for Red Bull, and I'm really concerned that what we're going to see is we're going to get halfway through the season and Red Bull's going to end up dropping someone else into that seat. That's, and this whole cycle is going to repeat again until we have Franco Colapinto for 2027. Because Alpine will fuck up somehow, obviously.
Mobile?
I see what you mean, because you can never predict anything around Red Bull and the way they're kind of juggling everything at the moment. It's going to be
shitty.
Oh, sorry, no, you can't predict it's going to be shit. Yeah, but the whole kind of thing is gradually imploding, and they've got there's a lot to kind of go over when it comes to Red Bull. I think Lawson is an interesting case because I see what you're saying, Jason. Because there's absolutely a world in which it doesn't work out for him, like I say, just being that 2/10 off can put you at the back, and then they want to drop him. But who do they put in, though, in that case? Because
I have a name.
I feel like they can't do a U-turn on Tsunoda at this point because they had the opportunity to do that. And can they seriously turn around and go, actually, no, we should have put you in the car all along? Will he be happy with that? Will kind of negative publicity that's going to come around with that? Hajar has only just arrived, and
it's another risk.
I'm not, a huge risk, and I'm still not fully convinced on him entirely. So then, are we back to the old days of trying to poach someone from somewhere else? Who do they get? Hulkenberg would be good. It's such a bizarre kind of situation. I don't even know what my expectations for Lawson is, because, like you say, I don't think that Red Bull is going to be towards the front. Survive, it is a great way of putting it. And I think the worrying thing for Verstappen in that case is that Lawson is not going to want to be a number two or a team player in the way that Sergio Perez was. You know, this guy is just about to start his first full season, never mind anything else that goes with it as well. He's hungry and he wants to prove himself, and he wants to show that if Verstappen leaves, which is becoming more and more likely as time kind of goes on there, that he wants to be the one to kind of lead that project forward. So he's not going to sit down and be Mr. Nice Guy with Max. We've seen how kind of combative he can be on track. I don't think that's going to yield at all this year unless we get to a really kind of big, sticky incident with that. But a lot of it is dependent on where that car is in comparison to the rest of the field, but it's going to be very tightly compacted with competitiveness. And I don't know what Red Bull are going to do about focusing on 25 or 26, because they need a competitive package to keep Max happy. But then at what point, what do you sacrifice in order for that to happen? Do you focus on 25 to make sure he's got the best car he can, but then lose everything for 26? Or do you do vice versa and try and placate him to be happy for 1 year in a car that's falling further and further back from where it once was?
Yeah, and just before casually jump on, I just want to clarify. Lawson, as I've said repeatedly, is a very, very, very capable driver. I remember going on about watching him in Super Formula.
There's far too many very used, honestly.
Very, very, very capable driver. Very capable driver. Invest in Lawson coin. But yeah, I think he will adapt. I think he will do better than Perez in that car. The problem is just the variables. Like I said, it's just everything could be stacked against him this year, and that's my concern. And if he gets no support, like in his first full season, like for Perez that was tough after 10 seasons. I can't imagine in your first full season in there how you deal with that. But anyway, sorry, casual.
Yeah, it does appear that Helmut Marko has kind of made his mind already. Liam Lawson is getting the seat. It's not because he's their long-term prospect. They don't look at him that way. The way they're talking about it, they're just hoping that he's within 3/10 of Max. I think it's going to be a tough ask to be within 3/10 of Max, especially when the car is the way he wants it. The team completely is entirely focused on how basically catering to the needs of Max Verstappen. That's how the team works. Almost you can say just 99% of the entire team will be focused on giving each and every 10th to Max. In that scenario, it becomes a very lonely place. And when you're a young driver who is basically in his first season, honestly, the other 6 race flings are just nothing. When you're in that situation, it becomes very, very hard to actually, first of all, find a foundational footing within a team and then build on it. And you know what will be the biggest problem? The biggest problem will be just what Checo faced in 2024. There are going to be 4 teams which will be very close. And then you'll have a scenario where Lawson ends up getting measured up against Kimi Antonelli. And he ends up getting showed up again and again and again. And that adds the pressure. That's where the problem is going to come. And again, the driver that they have in reserve, I think Arvid Lindblad is the one. The way Marco has pushed him, apparently he's racing in Formula Oceania right now. And he's going to secure his super license at 17 years of age. Again, something that Toto pushed to get the exemption for 18 years. It's basically Red Bull is going to, I think they're going to benefit from it. I think by mid-season we might see Lindblad replace Hadjar at RB because they have zero confidence in Hadjar, it seems, the way they're actually going about it. And by 2026, I won't be surprised if Lindblad jumps to Red Bull at 18 years of age, by the way. He's good. He's not a Kimi Antonelli. I don't think he is, but he's good. At least for now.
So, does anyone think there's any chance of Lawson doing a Ricciardo 2014?
No. Not even close.
I'm going to say yes.
All right. You'll look like a genius if it comes true.
Exactly. And if it doesn't come true, just cut this bit. It's fine.
Yeah. And if it doesn't come true, it's like, I was just joking. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's sarcasm, guys. Come on.
Yeah. What are you, American? Yeah. In terms of the team itself, where are you guys predicting? I think I said before it could be either 3rd or 4th. I don't think it's going to be top 2 teams in terms of pace.
Again, there is one thing. Finally, after all these years, it seems that Red Bull has realized that they cannot build an entire team around one driver. I think Honda is, I think Mobile, you'll know it. In MotoGP, Honda is basically suffering from being a very Marc Marquez team. They build a bike which is basically only one rider in the entire world who could ride it. And once he basically got injured, the team just fell down the pecking order. They're literally in the gutter right now because Mark, he injured his shoulder. I think he injured basically his entire body because of one crash or the other. And he left the team and no one could actually replace him. When he came back, he left the team for Ducati. So that's the scenario that Red Bull could find itself in, because the way they're building their cars right now, only one driver can actually extract anything meaningful from it. You cannot have an entire team that works like that. So this is something that Horner has actually talked about. Pierre Vacher has been very, very vocal about building a car that is slightly more driver friendly. So if that happens, I think Liam could benefit from it. But again, proof is in the pudding until we see.
I think the only thing that gives me any confidence on that is Dr. Obbs last week as well, saying that part of that as well is that they need to open the balance window, and that inherently will open it more. because if they keep going peaky the way they were, they're going to be stuck in that box the same way they were last year. So I think maybe, yes, them, not even if it's not intentionally for other drivers, even if they do just kind of open that balance, that settings window up, maybe that will just help. You know, it'll be funny as well if it turns out that, you know, they opened that balance up and Perez would have been fine in the car, you know. But yeah,
I mean, that's what Albon said, right? When Albon was basically, when he left, after 2021, he said the same thing, that if you look at my head-to-head against Max and you look at Checo's head-to-head against Max, it's basically the same. The thing is, he had a better car, and then he had a few races where he was able to stand out, and that's it. And that happens. Again, a lot of things will depend on the car. Yeah. But yeah, I think, again, just very basic prediction. I think Max decimates Lawson just like he's done with every other driver, other than Daniel.
So just on that, do you guys think the car will be in the top 4, top 3, top 2?
It will be in the top 3, top 4. It's basically, what's going to happen is Mercedes will continue to be its literal peaky self, and it rains and it snows, the car just lights up. Other than that, it will still be a bit on and off. I'm just basically thinking that might happen. McLaren and Ferrari, they're going to be the benchmarks, I think.
Yeah.
Their operational issues are what are going to let Max come into the game. So yeah, that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, I don't foresee a huge amount of shake-up. I mean, this is all way before pre-season and we haven't seen anything. I mean, even in that case, it's very rare you see anyone kind of vault up from 6th to 2nd or anything like that. I think, you know, Aston Martin a couple of years ago is the exception that proves the rule on that one. But yeah, I foresee it's going to be, from what I can tell, it's going to be that same kind of top 4 teams in around next year. I think there is one team that we'll touch on later on that I think is going to jump up the order, and another that's going to slide back a bit more. But I foresee Red Bull being kind of where they
Alpine.
were. I will touch on that later.
In Flavio we trust.
Jumping back to kind of the comparison between the two. Yeah, you've got to assume that Max beats Lawson, and I think the only question mark is by how much. A lot of it depends on. Well, a lot of it depends on how Lawson's getting on, and I think a lot of it depends on Max's motivations as well. Because if that car's not competitive, I want to see what kind of mood he's in. He did very well last year at kind of rallying the team and kind of building towards that championship, but I think that's because the championship was still on the line and he could tantalisingly see it. If we're coming into this year where maybe podiums are kind of the best bet you can have, what's he feeling towards that? And especially with all these rumours about the Aston Martin project as well, where his head's going to be at amongst all of that.
That's something I hadn't thought of as well, because we've been critical a lot of Senior Hamilton and the fact that he just kind of switches off when there's nothing on the line, and he's done this a bit before as well, or, you know, kind of not getting there. Max always kind of has been that driver that I've said is quite close to Schumacher in that he's always just on it every weekend. You know, it'll be interesting to see, because now it's a different situation. It's not before where he's kind of fighting for wins, preparing for the day a title comes. He's got 4 in the bag now. That'll be interesting. Yeah, like if
plus
if they show up, plus a kid at home at some point. Yeah, like that's an interesting point I hadn't considered. Like, what if they show up, they're clear 4th, the other 3 are ahead, and there's no chance at a title? Like, does he start, you know, switching off, or do we see that's going to be interesting? I hadn't thought of that, but that would be an interesting.
What do you think? What do you predict in that case?
Maybe he retires at the end of the year, or, you know, takes a year off in 2026 and sees where the grid is and decides whether to come back. I mean, like, everyone's talking about the Aston Martin project, but I think just of all the things that he's looking for, money is probably low on that list. Like, there is other things that there seems to be there, like, you know, setting up a team for him in sports cars, is it? And like other things like that.
Yeah.
And the fact that perhaps he would know better than us, like, what is Red Bull's engine project and project looking like for 2026. I'm sure he could easily sit down with Newey. I don't know if, like, how much Newey has input on that, and maybe Newey's like, guys, like, we have Alonso, I came here kind of to do this, replace Stroll if you want, but not Alonso, you know, like, could see all that behind the scenes as well. I don't know. I just think if he leaves Red Bull, though, I don't know if he goes straight to like another project for 2026. So I don't know how much faith I put in that, to be honest.
Yeah, there's a lot to be interested in about that Aston project that ticks a lot of boxes, because it is it's reuniting with Newey, it's reuniting with Honda. There's talks of millions and billions pounds worth of dollars on a contract. I think the one thing it doesn't necessarily take into effect is Max himself, because he's never kind of been that guy who wants a project. He just wants to win races. He wants to win race after race. He wants to win championship after championship. And when he can't do that anymore, that's probably when he'll have had enough. Like you say, with the kid on the way as well, he's been in this game for a very, very long time, certainly in Formula One and obviously in other circles as well. And that takes its toll as well, by you going round and around the world every year, year after year. At some point you want to stop. Casual, the closest kind of link you think in motorbike terms is when we had Casey Stoner retired, about 27, I think he was. Yes, there were kind of health concerns there as well, but also that was again another case of a guy who'd been doing it since he could barely walk, and then got a family, had, wife and kids, and just wanted to stay home and enjoy that. So at some point that's going to play into Max's head. Whether it's this year, I don't know. I don't know. Like we say, I think a lot of it's going to depend on those first few races, how competitive that car is. And then we'll kind of go from there. But if Max does decide enough's enough, then Red Bull are in a lot of trouble. Because even if we have a Lawson Lindblad lineup for 2026, let's say,
They're gone.
That's good, but it's kind of Ocon, Gasly, Alpine levels of good. It's not championship
worse,
winning
honestly, yeah.
good,
Yeah,
It's solidly talented, but not enough for what they should be.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. Okay, the thing is, when it comes to Max, I think he's still a competitor. Every race he goes into, again, that's the kind of mentality that he's shown. With the kid, I'm not entirely sure how his mindset changes or how he, tries to conduct himself, because that's where I think the biggest dynamics change will happen with him. And I think we'll see that at the start of the season, how things are. If he's willing to actually put in those effort, put in those hours, I think he still is. Because look, deep down inside, again, these are rich fucks. They don't really sit, and they'll hire a nanny, and the kid will be taken care of. No issues
Leave
of
the
that.
kid leave the kid at the petrol station to walk around.
Yeah. I mean, he's not going to give him to Joss, right? Until at least the kid reaches 15 or 20 years. No chance.
Maybe he'll hand him over to the Yoss School of Motoring, and that'll be that.
I mean, if he hates him too much, then he has.
Yeah.
Anyways, I just don't see him taking his foot off the pedal. I think if the car sucks, he'll still basically turn up. Because look, the man loves racing. That's how he is. That's the only part of Formula One that he enjoys. Other than everything else, he despises, and he's quite vocal about it when it comes to media and every other obligation that he has to take care of. 2026 is a question mark, but I think what Max has shown, at least to a certain extent, I don't know how much I can trust him on that, but in his comments, he said that he's very loyal to the team. I think the only linchpin when it comes to it is Marco. If Marco continues to stay, or if something happens to him, in that case, I think I can see Max basically uprooting and moving to some other place. Yeah. If Marco is there in 2026, I think he'll still be there. I don't see him going.
Okay. And speaking of
one thing, by the way. I don't think we've talked about it yet. The $1 billion Aston Martin contract. Shit, bullshit, or there's a possibility that it might happen. What do you think?
I mean, look, it could happen just because it depends on the way it was phrased.
By the way, just to give context, it's from Daily Mail. So that's the first thing. And
are they not a reputable news source?
I mean, which one of us is British? I mean, Mobile. What's your view on the Daily Mail?
I'm Irish and I've lived in London.
Do you want me to call you British?
You.
Yeah. so let the Brit take the stage on this one. Yeah, Mobile. What's your view on Daily Mail? How reputable is it?
I wouldn't wipe my ass with Daily Mail.
Yeah.
They chuck out a lot of tabloid rumours, but it's not the hitting source that we all turn to here if we're looking for reputable news, I will say.
Have you checked what News of the World have said about it? Look, the thing is, these figures get thrown around, but $1 billion deal could mean a lot of things, especially if you're talking about the sports car deal, for example. Does that include setting up the sports car team? Does that include ambassadorship for 10 years afterwards.
Nothing. The thing is, there was nothing.
This is my point, though.
It was entirely spitballing.
Of course,
the
and what they
contract
did
could be
was
200
just
million.
doubled.
Yeah,
They just doubled Lewis Hamilton's fee. And said,
By the way,
right,
Lewis
this'll
is not
piss some
getting
people
100
off.
million either. Apparently, it's 55 million or something. So even
Oh,
that
no.
was.
You're telling me
utter
Ferrari's racist now as well? This is getting out of hand. Did you see his
yeah.
Godfather pose today, by the way?
Oh, it was beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was nice.
Before we get on to Ferrari, though, let's talk about another absolute shit show in the French Ferrari, because I think it lines up that this is another team that will likely do an in-season driver swap already. I don't know who wants to start, but where do we think Gasly and Doohan's going to stack up, and do we think Doohan is going to be there after 5 races, given that there's another North American standing beside, waiting to get in the car?
He's North American.
He's South American. I just
Yeah.
every chance to
Okay.
dig at Helmut Marko, I will take.
Yeah, you should. You're beating up on an old man.
By the way,
anyways,
I'm just point this out. I'm very, very angry because I think I told you at the end of last season, if Colapinto ends up on the grid, I really like him and I'm going to become a proper Colapinto fanboy. And then he fucking signs with Alpine and I'm like, I'm going to shoot somebody.
5 years. For 5 years.
Should I rant first or does someone else want to start?
Go for it.
Right. First of all, Gasly's French, so he's going to beat Doohan because Australians are all lazy bastards. We know this. It's a fact. I'm joking. Look, I think Doohan is a good driver. He's a capable pair of hands, but I think Gasly with experience, and Gasly is a decently fast driver, as much as I dig him for being French and useless all the time. So I don't think he's going to outperform Gasly, and I think the problem is, even though that's not what he needs to do, that's basically going to be the excuse from Flavio to swap him out, because the simple fact for me is just, you put Doohan, your reserve driver for ages, on a 5-race contract or 6-race contract, including Abu Dhabi, I think it was, right? Something like that. And drop him into the team after kind of floating about for ages on what you're going to do. And then as soon as one race is over, you sign up Franco Colapinto on a 5-year contract. Taking him off of a situation where he doesn't have a race seat, where you could have easily signed him on 1 year as test and reserve. If you sign him on 5 year, it's because you want to use him. And let's be honest, you're not replacing Gasly at the moment anyway. At least until after his contract is up, because why would you? He's performing well. He's, a good name in France. All this. Yeah, exactly. So it's clear to me that unless Doohan comes in and absolutely fucking destroys Pierre Gasly, in which case maybe they drop Gasly, I don't know. But unless that happens, Doohan is out and Franco Colapinto's in. And I'm pissed off because this is going to ruin Franco Colapinto's career, because Alpine ruins everybody's career. But the last thing I'll say on it, I guess, because I haven't really said anything except cursing a lot and getting angry, is that I do think Franco Colapinto is a real deal. And I think if he is dropped in within a few races, I think he's going to be showing why Gasly is a midfield driver at best. Thoughts?
Mobile?
I'll jump back to Jack Doohan first, and then I'll meander through kind of the rest of my thoughts as well. It's interesting that Doohan is there at all, and I think I can pinpoint why. I think from a lot of what I've read and listened to, there was that shootout between him and Schumacher for the seat, and from all accounts I've heard, Schumacher was faster in that test, and it was a kind of a surprise to Jack and to Mick that it was Jack that got the nod for next year. And I think part of that is the flexibility that Jack provides with that, because I was discussing Doohan with a friend of the podcast, Peter Brook, not that long ago, and we were both sort of saying he's on the fringes of F1. He's kind of one of those people who's good, but probably not quite good enough. There is maybe a chance he gets on the grid if all the dominoes kind of line up in the right way, but it's unlikely. Lo and behold, we had kind of the whole situation last year where they did kind of all perfectly fall and he's in the seat. But I think he knew when he signed that contract that he's very much a kind of stopgap kind of driver and solution for what they've got going on there. I've lost my train of thought.
Just like Alpine.
Yeah, they, that's a team that's in a lot of flux at the moment. Though they've not said it, we can all safely assume that thing is up for sale and that they are desperately trying to get those kind of punters in as well. So they need someone like a Doohan who can be there temporarily, and then as soon as a new owner comes in, they can put whoever else they kind of like in the car, whoever they prefer to it as well. And I think Doohan is smart enough to know that he's not going to get an opportunity anywhere else on the field. So you either take a 6-race deal and you actually get to race in Formula One, which is your lifelong dream, or you turn it down and you've missed that boat. And obviously he's going to have confidence himself. No one's going to back him more than he backs himself. He's going to have seen all these rumours about Colapinto coming in. But as we know from the likes of a Colapinto, if you can go in there and immediately drive flat out and impress people, then that conversation goes away and you're talked of kind of more favourably. And he'll be backing himself to do that. I will say, I think Alpine are going to go quite well next year. And it's because of the being sold prospect around it. I think nothing makes it more enticing a kind of prospect to buy into and sell than if you've got a team that are regularly floating around the top 5 in the grid. So I think it's all guns blazing on their front to put everything into 25.
You think Flavio's like turning the engines or poking holes in the DRS, like kind of?
Yeah, he's got his pickaxe out and he's just going around the front of it for speed holes. Yeah, I think Alpine could be a decent little prospect because they want someone to buy it, and then Flavio is intelligent enough to know the faster you make a car look, that the more likely you're going to get a buy for it as well. So, if that is the case, then Gasly's got a great chance of. He is a very good, solid midfield operator. We've yet to see really if it can be anything beyond that, but give him a decent midfield car, and he will always score you points and occasionally get on the podium as well. He's always a safe pair of hands for that. Doohan is a question mark, and like you say, I think it's a question of when, not if. Unfortunately, he goes as much as he backs himself. Like you say, you don't sign someone on a 5-year deal and not want to use them. Add to the fact of that as well that he's got so much kind of more sponsorship with him as well, because all of those Perez sponsors have neatly circumvented the one other South American who is on the grid in Bortoleto, and they're going straight to Colapinto because they know he's exciting, and that's the kind of thing that they want to be involved with as well. So in that situation where Colapinto then just jump in, and I think, the car is a decent prospect. You could get both of them scoring a decent-ish amount of points. This is all hearsay. This is all, I've got nothing to base this on other than kind of my own opinion on what my mentality would be if it's this kind of situation.
Yeah.
But I see it going well, but Gasly, we kind of have to split the predictions into two, really, because it's Gasly versus Doohan and then Gasly versus Colapinto.
Yeah.
Against Doohan, Gasly should have a comfortable advantage, certainly based on what we saw in Abu Dhabi for where Doohan's pace was. Yes, he'll have a bit more preparation over the winter, so hopefully that gap will be a little bit smaller. Against Colapinto, I think Gasly still shades it, but Colapinto will push him a lot harder. I think we're talking like very fine margins in terms of like an end of season head-to-head.
One last thing just because I was so angry, you brought it up there about the sponsorships. That was another reason as well why I think Colapinto will go in, because if you're trying to sell a team as well, like you've got this kid on a 5-year contract who's blazingly fast, exciting, and got loads of sponsors. You get him in the car, and it's like, look, you can do whatever the fuck you want with Gasly, but look what you've got in the car now. Like, it's another selling point, you know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm all in on Colapinto now. Sorry.
No, that's good. It's just that there are whatever's going on with Alpine right now. It has the entire imprints of Flavio. It hasn't taken him much time to basically do his thing. 5 races or 6 races, whatever. I'd be surprised if Doohan even lasts 6 races, because I'm pretty sure Flavio is going to make sure that the car that Doohan has compared to Gasly, it's not going to be good, so that he has another reason to get rid of him. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen, because that's just how Flavio operates. He has done that in the past as well. I mean,
Gasly's going to crash. Gasly's going to crash. Safety car comes out.
Yeah, and Doohan wins. Yeah, of course.
Shit, no, sorry, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. He's gone. Doohan is gone, and in terms of driving, I think he's decent enough. He could be your typical solid midfield driver, maybe have his peaks and stuff. If he was not that unlucky, I think he would have been the year Theo Porcher won the championship. I think it should have been Doohan. He basically ran the first 8 races with a cracked chassis. That was how pathetic Formula 2 is, by the way. And then after that, he was last in the championship, and then by the end of the season, he was third. And that's how much gap he actually covered. So he's good. It's just that he's not your he does not have the gold dust in terms of what Franco Colapinto has, not only because of the performances, but because of the shit ton of money that he's going to bring. And for Flavio, that money matters at this stage because he's basically the team is selling. What I don't understand when it comes to Alpine is why did they get? First of all, they've got a Japanese driver as well. I'm forgetting his name.
Ryo Hirakawa.
Yeah, he's a Toyota back driver, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, he is.
Right? They've got him for basically a free practice session. Then they've got Paul Aaron. They've actually forced him not to do another season in Formula 2. Bonkers decision. I have no idea why. So they've got him.
High-tech.
Yeah, probably.
Gasly.
They've got
Aaron Colapinto 2026.
Yeah. And by the way, another Alpine backed driver will be in F2 this season, Gabriele Mini, and he's good. He almost won the F3 last season. He might win it this season. I think he's driving for Prema. And if he wins the championship, you have at least 4 reserve drivers. What the fuck is going on? And who is the most deserving driver in that case? It's complete nonsense. Again, it's basically everything is you can see it. Everything is pretty much focused on the short-term goal of we have to pump as much value as we can into just making this a fat chicken that can be sold to the highest bidder, which is high.
You know what this just makes me think though is like Alpine has gone out and somehow made the worst version of 2 different teams. So they've said they wanted to be the French Ferrari, which they have been in terms of building a car that just randomly works and other times doesn't. Strategy wise, make shit calls all the time, is run really poorly. And then they've gone, can we make a really shit version of Red Bull's junior program? And they've done that too. What a spectacular team it is. It's just so
disaster,
French
honestly.
in every way. I love it. God.
The level of mediocrity, I mean, it's just hilarious, honestly.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And moving on.
Look, I do hope that Mobile's right though, and they like cook something and put Flavio in, and then it kind of falls apart. Flavio driving would be amazing. But yeah, they put Franco in. Franco does really well, shows off what he can do.
By the way, I
and then
really
goes
forgot.
to a bigger team and replaces Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari or something.
And that's actually the thing I actually wanted to talk about. Again, Doohan and Gasly, it's not going to be a competition. I think I will be surprised if he lasts 6 races. When it comes to Franco and Gasly, I think Gasly should be ahead. But in case he isn't, Franco is not going to stick around for 5 years in Alpine. That's very, very clear.
There'll
If
be
Red
tons
Bull
of
is struggling,
breakout
he's going to
clauses.
Red Bull. If somehow, by the way, he's still Williams backed, right? Williams still has. I don't get it. You're leasing
The wording
someone
on
for
that was
5
really
years.
strange.
But Williams is known for doing this stupidity, right? They did it with Jenson Button back in the day, and they're still doing it. Doesn't matter who's basically leading the team. It's just the same stupidity. Let's see what happens there. If Franco is good, I think it's good that he got the chance. But if he beats Gasly, I think he's basically he's the most prized possession in Formula 1 in that case. That's how he would be treated as.
I would not be surprised if Franco Colapinto, and I can't remember who his manager is, but it's someone. It doesn't matter.
It's a
But yeah.
lady. It's an Argentine lady.
Oh well, then women can't manage.
By the way, and James Vowles. So those are the 2 guys that actually manage.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't be surprised if the 5-year deal was literally just, like I said, Flavio and Franco's team both kind of getting what they want, which is Flavio gets something to kind of sell and shout about, and if he gets in the car and is quick, even better. Yeah. And Franco's side is like, just sign whatever. This is fucking F1. People can just buy the contract out. It doesn't matter. Just give me, like
exactly.
Very Argentinian thing to do. Yeah, like Germany, just come over, leave your gold here. We're fine. Yeah. So anyway, where do we want to jump from there? Another French Ferrari to another shit show, the real Ferrari.
Today Lewis basically did the whole thing, right? Yeah, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about Italian Godfather. Yeah. For anyone who is listening to this on Spotify, leave a fucking 5-star review. Don't be a prick. And while you're there, I'll just explain to you. There was an image today, if you haven't seen it, of Lewis Hamilton at Maranello standing beside possibly one of the most beautiful Ferraris ever. I think bashing Lando.
F40, right?
It was an F40. I think bashing Lando as well, because someone crashed Lando's F40 recently. So I think it's a bit of British bashing, if I'm honest. If it's not, I'll put that out there and start that rumour. With 7 open windows behind him, very specific there. And Autosport put lining up for an 8, which is just never going to happen. And then someone posted a photo of his hairline receding, and I commented that perfect, because it looks exactly like Marlon Brando's hairline now.
Okay.
Anyway, there. I think that's as insulting as I can get. Probably not, but where do we begin?
I think the first thing that actually came to my mind was because today, even in MotoGP, by the way, there was the Ducati launch, and you had Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia, and on one side of the timeline, I think I put that out as a post as well. You had Marquez kissing the 9 of the 93 because he's already an 8-time world champion, and a lot of Marquez fans were happy that look what he's doing. He's giving basically a hidden message that he'll be winning the 9th championship. And then you had Lewis and the whole this window thing. I mean, that's what lack of racing does to people. That's all. Nothing more than that. That is it. You start imagining bullshit that does not even exist. Like, he basically created that entire thing right now, isn't it? Anyways,
you know how staged that was as well, just because like the outfit he was in, and the fact that it's like you're going to Ferrari, like a boyhood dream. You can't even crack a smile, like not even.
Yeah, that was weird.
You know? And then I said, clearly this is because it's raining and his Ferrari's on slicks, and he's already like, shit, what have I done? You know, that's just.
I mean, he's seen the future, right? Anyways, so Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari. Mobile. Let's start with the more positive, because I know where probably Jason and I are going with it.
I mean, you say that, but I might struggle as well. I guess maybe the difference is I want to be positive about it.
What do you mean the difference is? We do as well.
Yeah,
I mean, the more years Lewis stays, that's more content, right? Basically.
I think he's going to win the championship because it's like he's in red colors and it's MAGA time.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Awful. Yeah, I hope he does well, but the one thing that consistently looms in my mind is just the historical statistics and facts of what happens when people go to Ferrari. There's, with the exception of Schumacher, we are littered with the likes of Prost and Mansell and Vettel and all sorts of pieces like this, where big name goes there and there's a bit of success, but it doesn't work out the full way we want. And on top of that as well, you've got countless examples of X driver joins Y big brand name, and again, it all just kind of falls into a disappointing implosion where the expectation is far too high and it can't be matched with that as well. So the worst case scenario is that this is just entirely the wrong fit in all the wrong ways, and it's just a really unfortunate kind of end to what is, one of the greatest drivers that certainly I've witnessed it in my lifetime and will rank among kind of the GOATs of all F1 history. And that would be a real shame. The other flip side is because we've not seen a proper Lewis Hamilton since the end of 2021. The mix of the Mercedes not being where it should, and then you had all of last year where for all the good he did, and we had there's the positive, those wins which were great to see, but he did I think you said it before, Jason, he was almost kind of sleepwalking through most of the year, just waiting for it to be over and move on to something else. So if we have a properly motivated Hamilton, then that's exciting to see. I think the real problem he's going to have is Leclerc on the other side of the garage, because that guy is getting better and better. In my view, he was definitely top 3, possibly my driver of last season, because of the improvements he was making, and again that consistency he had to his bow as well. I think whereas the other candidates you put for that were Verstappen and Norris, and with those I always put like a little asterisk of there was stuff that they did that I didn't like, or there were question marks over. Whereas there wasn't so much of that for Charles. He's always been fast over one lap, but last year he really improved in terms of his race pace as well, and translating what he could do on a Saturday into a Sunday as well. If that Ferrari is good enough, he can be in a championship contention this year. He should be winning multiple races this year if the Ferrari's good enough. The question then is how close Hamilton can kind of tag along to the back of that, because in my mind, Leclerc is winning that head-to-head.
I put it this way a few times last season, and I think it kind of sticks, which is if Lewis Hamilton cannot beat in these regulations George Russell at his own team, a team that was quite most successful partnership in Formula One history, there's no reason that team would have sabotaged him. Sorry, Lewis Hamilton fans, but if he's getting that comprehensively beaten by George Russell, and I know the points don't show that, but if we take into account the DNF, the DS disqualification, all these different things, like he got comprehensively beaten last season by George Russell. Over their 3 seasons together, George was the winner of overall. I think except on points again, but again points need to be caveated all the time. If that happens at your own team, you're going up against Charles Leclerc at his team now in Ferrari. Ferrari, as we've touched on, historically not great at being brilliant for former world champions looking for a place to kind of go, especially former world champions going there later in their career after their success. Yeah, I just don't think it's going to go well. And I think it's a situation where I would love to see Lewis win a few races at Ferrari, and I think we will see that. But I would not be surprised if we get a situation where Lewis wins 4 or 5 races with Ferrari in the same season where Charles Leclerc wins his first championship. Because I think if they have a car that is kind of title worthy, it's going to be Charles that takes it, because not only is Lewis famously kind of that driver that beds in at the start of the season. 2021 was the best start to a season I think he's ever had. He normally takes that warm-up time. He now has to do that in a situation where he has to get to know a whole new team, a whole new car, a whole new country, doesn't speak Italian, which I'm sure Ferrari will be delighted about. All these different things that he has to deal with. At a place that's not as good at kind of nurturing drivers in the way Toto did with, dealing with just whatever came. It's like, we're always backing you. Like, if Lewis gets up when Charles wins a race and says, well, if I had qualified better, for the Tifosi and Ferrari are going to say the same thing I did after Vegas. Well, then fucking qualify better. What are you talking about? So he's not going to have that backing behind him. And I think that's what happens to these drivers. Like we saw it with Vettel. Ferrari just bashes and bashes and bashes, and you either win the championship or your confidence collapses and you're out the door. And I'm just concerned that he's at the stage in his career and pace-wise in his career where the latter could happen quite quickly. And I would love to be wrong, because it would be pretty epic of a turnaround, and it would be an epic end to a career if he came and won an 8th title with Ferrari. Like, even I would be like, well done, sir. Like, that's incredible. The odds are stacked against him, and I think, a lot of people bash Vettel because of how his career ended, but I know, Mobile, you have you like Vettel as well. We're both Vettel fanboys. Vettel was a lot better driver than people give him credit for, and like he crumbled at Ferrari. And I think some Hamilton fans are in for a bit of a surprise, or maybe I'm wrong, but I just can't see him beating Leclerc this year, and I think that contract could end early. I think he'll stay there for 2026, but I don't think it's going to go on much longer than that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just that Ferrari have hired, again, assuming he's getting 100 million. Apparently, James Allen says it's 55 million, but assuming, let's say it's still 100 million until it gets
It's probably 100 million with all of different, bonuses,
perks and everything,
sponsors and everything added in.
Yeah. The thing is, when you're putting 100 million into a driver, you're not doing that just for the pictures and the videos and the sales of cars, right? You're doing it because
it is Ferrari we're talking about, so you could be wrong.
Still, to a certain extent, they want they want this driver to win the championship. That's why they've actually put in that kind of money. Even if Charles is your whatever they call it, predestinato or El Predestinato, whatever that is, which is basically predestined to win with Ferrari. They want this guy to be your main leader. They basically want his poster at every place in Maranello and throughout the world, so that this just ultimately you get a return on the kind of investment that you're putting in. There are two ways this is going to go. One is he wins the championship and basically is the greatest of all time, because doing it at 40 and beating Leclerc in the same car, that's big. There's the other way. The other thing is, if he's not, and again, you touched on a lot of these things, that first of all, the adaptation needs to be there in terms of the car. I don't really buy into the theory that he's not able to adapt to a ground effect car, because look, 2022 and 2023, they exist. He has his days when he's not fully into it. That's there. But then there are other days where he has shown that the potential and the pace and the talent is still there. So you really can't really say that he's not on top of these cars. So that's not an issue. The issue is that when it comes to Ferrari, that car will be entirely built by Leclerc's input. On the other hand, you have Lewis, who showed in 2024 that if everything is not perfect, it gets tough. And if he's under the assumption that, okay, he'll take a first few weeks off and slowly the gap between the two will taper, I think that would be a wrong thing to do, because if there's a title battle on the table, I don't think you want to leave anything for your rival to actually pick up. And something that actually Max did against him when 2021 started. There were races where Lewis took days off. Monaco was one of them. To a certain extent, Turkey was one of them. If he does this right now, Ferrari would be forced to pick a favorite driver, which would be Leclerc in that case. I don't think that's something that Lewis will take. A driver that has been the alpha since 2007, basically throughout his life. At 40 years of age, him willing to take a back seat, I don't think that's going to happen. It comes down to Fred Visser, honestly. Whether he's willing to put his foot down. Again, both of these drivers are someone who he has nurtured and seen them grow into whatever they've become. So it would be a tough decision for him as well. It's just, the entire thing has disaster written all over it. That's it.
I love how the feeling across all three is this. I don't.
I don't see it going. The thing is, if Ferrari was a shitty car right now and Lewis joins the team, I think it would have been the best thing for him, because then he would have a place to hide, to be honest. On the grid, he can say that the car is not good. But if you have Leclerc fighting for wins every race weekend, and you're basically fighting Kimi Antonelli to basically not be P8 in the race.
And depending on the suspension change, depending on how that goes, given, as we talked about OBS last week, they've already changed their suspension once, so they kind of should know what they're doing. But taking that into account, like as you said, it could be just them and McLaren as the two top teams, with kind of Red Bull and Mercedes nipping at the heels and having weekends on and off. In that situation, like you said, there is nowhere to hide, because if Charles is winning leading the championship, and he's getting a couple of race wins, that's
look suppose let's say it's 10 races are done. Lewis is too far behind. Leclerc is leading the championship or is in contention against, let's assume, a Lando or a Max or an Oscar. In that situation, if Fred Visser goes up to Lewis and says that you might have to take a step back and be the second driver, that's unfathomable. That's unfathomable. And that is the problem. That is why I've said it again and again. They've made the wrong call by going for this kind of a combination.
It didn't make sense to me, because if we're in that situation this year, if we get to like halfway through the season, right? And let's say Charles is leading a title, right? Now, obviously, these are all hypotheticals. We could get in and Max could be flying ahead again. Who knows? But let's just say we get to that situation where halfway through the season, Charles is leading the championship, and he's leading it by like a decent amount. Well, enough anyway, a comfortable lead, let's say, right? If we're in a situation then where, as you said, like Lewis has taken a while to warm up, and the teams are so close that we get a situation like Max last year where, you know, Leclerc is leading the championship, but Ferrari's like second or third in the constructors. That's going to make you question, like, well, would Carlos Sainz have done a better job? And the answer would have been,
Yes.
yeah, probably, because he was there. Not because I'm not saying he's a better driver, but just he was
We just
embedded.
did, by
He
the
was
way.
doing. I'm saying Carlos Sainz is
I
a
know
better
what you mean,
driver.
Jason.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the same kind of thing. Yeah.
But yeah, like that's going to make them look bad. And I think the only one who'll have a smile on his face in that situation will probably be Fred Vasseur, because he'll be like, as much as I like Lewis, I told you to fucking give me all the decisions, and then you went over my head and spent 100 million to put a worse driver in the car. There, I said it, casual. Are you happy?
100 million for a second driver. That's the question that Ferrari has to answer, honestly. And do they think something like this is sustainable? How much sales or whatever they're going to gain out of it, if it is sustainable to have low. And look, it's not going to be a case. Look, Lewis is not Vettel, in the sense that Vettel loved Ferrari and adored Ferrari.
And was very
Lewis
much
has
a
a more
development driver,
transactional
right?
relationship. And I think that's why I don't think Lewis will be broken, in the sense that Vettel was broken because he truly wanted to win with Ferrari, and I don't think Lewis has that kind of an attachment with it. Because again, for Vettel it was Michael and emulating what he had done. For Lewis, there's no such thing on that. There's no comparison on that front. So it will be a very transactional relationship. And if it comes down to basically throwing Ferrari to the curb, he will not hesitate. He did not hesitate at Mercedes either. The kind of comments
Which
that were made.
blew my mind. It blew
Yeah.
my mind. It blew my mind that like his team is backing him up, and he's literally like throwing Mercedes, who gave him a championship-winning car for 8 seasons, under the
In a
bus.
row.
Literally, yeah, like that. Honestly, I was always the guy who would slander Hamilton purely to wind up Hamilton fans, because it's just so much fun. And I do it now with Verstappen fans as well, because it's just so much fun. But 2024 was the first time where I've actually had that feeling of, oh, shut the fuck up, Lewis. Like, you know, it just felt like, come on. Like, I know the fans are giving this shit to the team, but you know, like, of all people, you know how much the team has backed you, and you're still throwing them under the bus. It's a bit like, oh, come on. Like, I expected better, I think, is the problem. You know?
And you know, it was only and only today I realized that I was actually writing an article, and it was basically something on these lines, that this is something that Fred Vasseur will worry about. The fact that the Lewis Hamilton of 2024, if that joins Ferrari right now, that's trouble. At least in terms of driver management, team management, title challenge, and everything.
Well,
And
he'll
while
be
I was
gone
writing,
quickly.
yeah, and while I was writing about it, I actually specifically mentioned that the entire incident where Toto Wolff even admitted in the media that that Mercedes had received emails from fans were accusing of bias and everything. And then I realized that Lewis never pushed back on it publicly. He never made any comment or anything that fans should not come out and say something like this. My team is I'm backing the team is backing me, and stuff like that. And anyways.
He kind of smirked and shrugged through all of it. I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, I will. Mobile, I'll let you speak in a second. Sorry. But yeah, I think that's one situation where if they get the 3 things lining up, where they're paying him 100 million, expecting him to come in as like at the very least a very well paid ambassador that helps, you know, bring a lot of attention to Ferrari. If they get him not doing that and not performing while they're paying 100 million, and while Charles is like fighting for a title, I think Ferrari, as we know Ferrari, they won't hesitate, even with Lewis Hamilton, to be like, oh, we've put Behrman in for 2026. Like, they won't think twice about it.
That's why I made that prediction, honestly.
They'll be happy to throw 100 million and write the contract off for 2026 and be like, yeah, right, good luck. Because Ferrari, as I've said a million times, no one is bigger than Ferrari, and Fred is trying to do the more approachable Ferrari, but Ferrari is still fucking Ferrari. They'll do what they're going to do. So
Yeah.
One thing I just want to say quickly is that, you know, in terms of as a team lineup, it's not the most cohesive in terms of if you want to win a championship, because we've seen time and again, the best way if you want to win a championship, you have a clear number one, and you have clear number 2. We saw that with Schumacher and Verstappen, all that sort of stuff as well. But as fans, as purists, as people who don't run the team, we don't want to see that. We want to see Senna and Prost and all that kind of sort of combatants between that sort of thing, where 2 of the best kind of drivers going hammer and tongs against each other. And this, as negative as we've been, there is still a little glimpse of potential there where we could have that. And if there's any time for that not to kind of blow up in your face, it's this year. Because in terms of all the other kind of those leading kind of 4 lineups, you have 2 where you have 2 very strong drivers where there's no arguably clear 1 or 2, in which case you have Ferrari and you have McLaren.
Yeah.
And then those where there is the more experienced head alongside the younger head in terms of Red Bull and Mercedes. Those younger heads are not experienced enough to be that kind of number 2 and sort of negating and getting in the way and all that sort of stuff as well. So we are, as a whole, we're in for a very potentially exciting kind of year, because
there's going to be a lot of things. Yeah.
I think, again, we saw a lot of race winners last year. I think, again, we're going to see the same this year. And there's a real prospect of the championship being really, really kind of exciting. We could have as many as 6 different names kind of linked, in contention for it, potentially.
Yeah.
But there's... But
why are you leaving Lewis and Lawson out of it, by the way?
No, I'm including Doohan.
Who knows?
These British people are always bashing Lewis. It's terrible.
Oh, God.
Hold on, let me just get my copy of the Daily Mail.
All right. Yeah.
Mercedes, by the way.
I was going to say, who wants to pick a team next? So
Mercedes. Let's go with Mercedes.
Okay.
So, okay, I'll go first. By the way, first impression of Kimi Antonelli.
I genuinely thought you were going to go, by the way, fuck Mercedes. That's what it looked like.
That's what it got up to us, yeah.
That crossed my mind, but they don't have Lewis anymore, so...
That would be fantastic. We've been dedicating 20 to 30 minutes for every team. We just went, fuck Mercedes, move on, next.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Williams.
Yeah, we better not... I think once we get past this and McLaren, let's rapidly
rush
go through that.
Yeah, exactly. Mercedes, by the way, a first impression with Kimi Antonelli. I mean, whatever you've seen, is he worth the hype? First from Mobile, is he worth the hype? Whatever you've seen of him, you've seen very little of him, by the way.
I've not seen a huge amount, but from what I've seen, I'm very excited. I made this point in one of my last videos that I made, where I would rather someone shows up and is immediately fast but error prone, rather than being cautious and building up, because then immediately we're talking about it and we're noticing it and we're analysing it. I think those first 2 laps from Monza practice that Antonelli was in, they're probably the most over-analysed laps we've had in F1 history in terms of looking at, that speed differential he had against Lewis in the same car and how quickly he was taking the corners and all this sort of potential there as well. So from that little glimpse, it's very exciting. For him, this is probably the best possible time and the best possible situation to be coming into Formula One, because certainly in terms of where Mercedes are, I think they had a little bit more kind of peaks last year in terms of winning, a few more races. But what you have in a Mercedes is a car that's very dependable for scoring points. Minimum, we're talking 8th place, possibly higher. And sure, occasionally is fast enough on the right days to be on the podium, to be on pole and winning that sort of stuff as well. So in terms of the expectations on him, it's relative, as minor as it can be. There's obviously a lot of hype around him. He's taking over Hamilton's seat, and he's being talked as this next kind of wunderkind Verstappen-esque figure. But in terms of giving yourself a year where you can put in the mileage in a car that is good enough to be scoring points, but you're not necessarily having that expectation on you to be winning races, and immediately, if George Russell was winning every race, you need to be in second place minimum. He doesn't have that kind of aspect on him as well. There's going to be a lot of mistakes this year. He's 18 years old.
Is he 18? Oh yeah, he's 18 now. Yeah.
If even without that, the burgeoning pressure of having to be fighting for wins, he's still under the pressure of having to, be a very, very fast Grand Prix driver and prove his worth. But what's positive is that all the noises we've heard, particularly from Toto as well, is that they are going to give him that space and that time to grow, and they are fully anticipating he's going to crash out of races this year. There's going to be big shots in practices and qualifying as well. he's going to have that space to nurture and learn from that as well. And from those kind of, that little flicker of pace that we've seen in just 2 laps, and then we kind of sort of a more consistent pace. I forget where his second free practice, it was Mexico. He got to spend a bit more time in the car and be a bit more comfortable. Yeah, I think it's one of the more exciting kind of prospects, but one without wondering too much about where he's going to finish, just knowing that this is the first step in what we're hoping is going to be a longer career, and the only way is kind of up for it. In terms of how he compares to Russell is tricky. I think we're still wondering the kind of level that Russell is at.
It's just astounding, honestly.
Yeah.
Astounding.
I'm literally looking at a poster that I have of a George Russell Williams car from here, so I speak good test that. I obviously rate him, and the stuff he did in Williams was fantastic. He's not. It's so difficult to judge how well he's been at Mercedes because of that Hamilton question and his motivations and everything that's been going on there as well. He's clearly a very, very talented driver because he's a multiple race winner now, and when the timing is right, he can beat anyone on his day. The question mark around him is, I suppose, on the same kind of level as like a Carlos Sainz in a way, in that he's very, very good. But the problem is we're living in a time where there are people that are even better than that. To like it in sort of tennis terms, it's like when you had Andy Murray at his height, but he was competing against a Djokovic and a Nadal and a Federer. You can be your absolute very best, and he could still only be coming home in 5th place because of how much better so many other people can be or are. Where Antonelli is in comparison to that, it's going to be really interesting.
Didn't Andy Murray win
He won multiple championships. Yeah. I think he won it at Wimbledon twice, if I'm not wrong.
It was the old Andy Pandemonium.
Very good.
Sorry, anyway, I think I cut you off.
Sorry to butt in, by the way. Sorry to completely break the flow.
That is the name of this podcast, though.
Yeah, I couldn't resist,
break
honestly.
the flow podcast.
Yeah. Just one question. What do you think should be the realistic expectation from Kimi in terms of performance?
Good question.
Thank you.
I think I wish Jason asked more questions like that.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I think to invite him back
on. In terms of realistic expectations, what I expect this year, I would say there's going to be peaks and troughs in the first half of the year. I think there's going to be good points finishes, but then a lot of retirements along with that as well, and some kind of big errors. If we can smooth those out and be still a competitive force in the latter half of the season, I think his minimum kind of aim needs to be just be a consistent point scorer and being able to kind of hone his wheelcraft, work on his 1-lap pace, all the sort of kind of education he needs to go across. I think in terms of his expectations, whereas everyone else were kind of saying, they should be achieving X wins or fighting for the championship, I think from an Antonelli's perspective, I don't think I can place a kind of quantifiable expectation on that other than just to see where he starts the season at, where he finishes the season at, and seeing that there is an upward kind of curve in terms of that progression, and then to be excited about where we can then be in 26.
I'm slightly... Maybe I expect a bit more in that case, because again, for me, the benchmark is Max, because I think and maybe it's a bit of an optimistic suggestion, but I think by 2017, Max was ready to fight for the title. In the right car, I think would have fought for the title, and he was, I think, 19 or 20 at that stage. That's not a lot. He won his first race at 18. In the right car, he would have won multiple races in 2016 easily. I remember he pulled off some brilliant drives in Brazil and other races. I think when you see that from a talent, what I want to see is, again, mistakes are fine. I want to see pace. I want to see performance on that front. He crashes a lot, fine. I don't want him to be slow. That is the only thing that I would hope. I want to see races where he quite clearly outclasses Russell. There needs to be at least a few races that I see that. That's something, that tends to be a bit of a, you can say, a thumbs down suggestion when it comes to Oscar, because I don't see that often. I don't see him often doing that against Lando. That's where I tend to take a step back against whenever I compare those two. I want to see that because again, for me, the benchmark is Max. And by 20, again, Max took some time to bed in, but again, he only had 1 year of car racing under him. Kimi is at 3. I think he did F4, F3, and F2. Freca and F2. So there's been a decent amount of time where he's honed his skills. Plus, he's had a lot of testing compared to what Max had. I'm hoping for a better, probably a higher expectation. I won't be surprised if he wins the race. I'd be fucking happy if he wins one of the first 3 races because then he breaks Max's record and people will lose their shit. And that will be the happiest day for me, at least for that at least period. Again, there are a few records that he can break this season, by the way. He can end up with most points for a rookie. Lewis has the record at, I think, 100 points. I think he should ideally beat that. There's the record for most wins. That's 4. Most poles, that is 6, I think.
I think it's 6 or 7.
That's
I'm looking at Hamilton or Villeneuve, yeah.
Villeneuve has that. I don't know. I don't think he can get the pole thing. But if he can get the wins thing and he can be the youngest race winner, imagine the kind of season we have. We have the find of the season in that case. In 2026, we'll be so much happy if that happens. But it's not going to, because that would be nonsensical expectations. But yeah, I think he can win a race. I think he can get a pole. I'd be very interested to see how he does in the wet, because he has been brilliant when it comes to those sessions, even in Formula 2. So all I want to see is those moments of gold dust where you see something special from him. Max showed a lot of it in 2015. I just want to see those things. So yeah.
Yeah,
Jason?
I'm just happy that finally we're going to get a driver who can push George Russell in the other seat. I think, it's going to be good to see someone finally do that, just like Piastri with Norris, now that the old man's left. Look, I think realistically I think at the start of the season, if we see him, what I want to see from him is like quick, and if he crashes a few times, who gives a shit? Like, I don't really care about the record thing. It would be funny from a Twitter standpoint.
Exactly.
Meltdown.
Oh, yeah.
First 3 races, if he wins one of them, we'll do a live stream, by the way.
But it won't just be him. Like, if he wins, imagine if he comes out and like wins the first race, for example, right?
Oh, wow.
That would make not only Verstappen fans annoyed, that would piss
Lewis
off
fans.
Hamilton fans as well.
Yeah.
It will be utter chaos, and I'm here for it. But yeah, I think that it's going to be a situation where he's going to be very, very quick at the start, but just mistakes, tire management are going to get in the way. I just want to see that by the end of the season, he's like pressuring George. Because I think if he's not pressuring George by the end, then it's like, okay, how good is this guy really? Because he could still be a very, very, very capable driver like Sainz is. But if he's not pressuring George, then he's probably not the next Verstappen. Like, that's the simple fact of it for me. The other thing is, just like I said, I genuinely, part of me does kind of mean that. I think Russell came in as like the number 2 at Mercedes. Not in his own mind, not in Mercedes' mind, but he was like, he was coming in as the future Lewis Hamilton, but to sidekick Lewis Hamilton for now. Now he has to become the Lewis Hamilton at the team, and he's not going to want a kid to come in and basically take that off him straight away. So I think we're going to see George really pushing it this year, and a George who doesn't have to worry about kind of paying his respects to Lewis like he did a lot of the time, I feel, over the last couple of years, because of people shouting and sending emails. So I think we could see George at his all-time best, and I do think, and I've said it a few times, I think like if we had an all-out Spec Series title, I think we would see a very close match between Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris even, and Russell. I do think those 4 are very, very quick drivers.
Fucking hell, Alonso. How the fuck can you forget about him?
Of course. You know what I mean. With these young guys who haven't got a title yet.
And again, Alonso.
The young guy, yeah. But like, I do think George is up there with those, with the Leclerc.
Yeah, he is.
I really do think he is that level of talent.
I mean,
so yeah, we'll see.
Again, sorry, coming back to Antonelli. This is an example I think Mobile will be able to associate with more. Last season, what happened in MotoGP with Pedro Acosta.
You just love leaving me out, don't you? Hey, Jason, if you don't watch
step
MotoGP...
up. Me and Cash are going to talk about MotoGP for a
We're
minute.
going to talk about manly...
Come back later.
We're going to talk about manly motorbikes. You go and talk about your women's things. Yeah.
Anyways, that kind of debut where you had first 3-4 races where he was just mixing it up with Marquez, Bagnaia. I think he crashed with one of them as well. That's what you want to see, and that basically a breath of fresh air. I think Formula One needs that. It would be all I want him to do is I want him to dive bomb Lewis at one of the races. I want him to piss off Max, Leclerc, all these drivers, so that just what Max did to these drivers, right? Max pissed off each and every one of them at different points, and I want Kimi to do that as well. If he does, again, his racecraft is something. I think he's a bit more conservative. That's what I'd say, at least for now, whatever I've seen. I think Ollie Bearman is a bastard when it comes to that. But at least Kimi Antonelli he seems a bit more conservative in Formula 2. Let's see how it goes, honestly.
I think breath of fresh air is a fantastic way of putting it. That's definitely not that the order is kind of set in a way, but we do kind of have that established. These are kind of the guys that we're talking about for a race win every weekend. And then I would love to see Antonelli, just barreling into the mix of that. Going, I'm fourth now. What are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to go for third, and just really kind of shaking things up. That would be fantastic.
First race in Australia, what is it? 1, 2, 3. In turn 3, he just dive bombs whoever is in front of him, gets into the lead, and just imagine everyone would be just sitting there and thinking, what the fuck just happened?
You are aware that basically it will be a case of Verstappen fans just inexplicably hating Antonelli for the rest of the season.
Verstappen fans, Lewis Hamilton fans, Leclerc fans, Norris's little kids.
Yeah.
So basically... everyone.
So speaking about the team itself real quick before we move on to the next one, what do you guys think? Do you think it's going to be in a position to fight for a title? Like, let's imagine the drivers are ready for it. Do you think the car will be able to? Or do you think it's going to have that up and down form once again for a fourth season?
I don't see a huge amount of change from last year, and I think we are still probably looking around fourth best for them. With those occasional peaks of when the track is right and everything works out, they can be in the hunt for wins and poles and all that sort of stuff as well. I think for them, they're definitely going to have a very keen interest on 2026 because they know with the regulations that's their best chance to shake up the order. And I think Toto Wolff is sensible enough that there's no point going for one moment of glory in 25 when you can build a real foundation for 26 and beyond. So, I suspect it's going to be more or less the same as what we saw last year. I'd obviously be pleasantly surprised if it's better than that. But I fully anticipate this is a team that's looking mostly towards 26 with a little bit more on 25. But the top four, I see them being fourth again.
Yeah, I'm slightly optimistic. Again, there are reasons to be. James Allison, this will be the first car that he'll build from start to the finish. Whether that makes an impact in terms of, look, they've reached a point in these regulations where they've done everything. They've gone with the zero pods, they've gone with different kind of innovations, they've copied others, they've done everything. They've built shitty cars and then they've built worse. At least now they're in a situation where I think they have a decent understanding of how the car should be. And at least, losing Lewis is a loss, the kind of engineering prowess he has. But at least for now...
He designed the car, as far as
precisely. It won 3 races, right? 4 races.
Yeah. So after he sketched it out at the start of the season.
Yeah. Oh, God.
That's why Ferrari hired him.
Yeah. Anyways, moving on. James Allison is someone who I rate very highly. I'm hoping he's the one who kind of makes it... Look, for me, the ideal case scenario is top 4 teams within a couple of tenths. That won't happen, but if they are within, let's say, 4 tenths of each other, and then the pecking order changes race by race, I think that would be perfect. I'm hoping that Mercedes is basically in contention, and if they are, I don't think they'll give up on 2025 as such. I think every team is basically going to look at the first preseason test and then the first 4-5 races. Once those are done, then they start evaluating how they want to go ahead, because you really don't know with these regulations. One team can find something that just catapults it ahead of everyone else. So, let's see.
I think I have this weird feeling that Mercedes is going to be like a dark horse that'll come out with the fastest car. And the only reason I keep thinking that is not because I'm just think it would be hilarious to Lewis Hamilton fans, just because it would be, but also just because they have tried everything that didn't work. So surely all that's left now is the stuff that works. Like they can't be, unless they come in now and they're like, hey, we found a double side pod. And then it just completely is like the slowest thing on the grid. It's like, oh, right, you found something else that didn't work. But
by the way, completely side. I don't know what actually from the dark horse it came to my mind. Apparently, Mercedes might still have a black livery. I mean, that's the
they're
reports.
going to. What Toto Wolff said it in a video. He
said
Lewis
that,
was talking about it.
Yeah, go for it.
He said we're going to keep it we'll still have it next year. And Lewis was like, "Oh, you're keeping the black," and he was like, "Yeah."
No, but is it a part of it being black or
my
the entire livery
assumption
being black?
My assumption, and this is what I kind of expected them to do, to be honest, is the way they had the silver, like some of the silver at the front and into black. I think the back is going to be black. The front is going to be like, it's going to kind of further back the black and then into the silver.
Basically blends a bit of black into the
and
silver.
I wouldn't be surprised if Toto, after all of that's gone on this year and backing up Hamilton, in the design office basically said, can you put the black further back with the silver further forward as a kind of a distinction of, look, he's fucking off now and we're getting quicker, Because those Germans have that. They're funny people, Germans. They're known for their humor.
Yeah.
So,
and the Austrians as well.
But yeah. An Austrian
in terms of
running
marketing,
a German
how
team
stupid a decision is it? By the way, I mean, sorry to talk about Formula One.
Yeah.
I think it's. I'm not a huge fan of the decision, honestly.
It's just because you're racist, though.
Yeah,
you know this.
Of course, Indians are racist against blacks. Make it make sense in any which way. Yeah.
Look, as a white person, I know everything about race. So
exactly. As the founder of racism, let's talk about
as one of the ancestors of the original racists, I would know best. Now, let me educate you, sir.
Yeah. Good. Keep
speaking of racism,
by the way, after
what do we think of McLaren?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Let's move on. Mobile
Norris Championship.
He's got to be certainly one of the favourites if we're assuming that McLaren are going to continue off from where they were last year in terms of the sheer pace. I mean, they did fall back a little bit in 24 in terms of the gap from 23 to 24, and then they kind of pulled forward again. I maintain, I think that there was a point where I strongly felt that, a Norris Championship was on last year. Sorry, Jason, to talk about motorbikes again, but there was a
I'll go.
Forgive me, it was I think it was 22 when Bagnaia won his first championship, where it was about 100 odd points back or something like that, but it was kind of, he was about sixth in the championship, but clearly the fastest guy in the field, and if he could just pull it all together, he'd win. And that's exactly what happened in the second half of the year. He just reeled off win after win after win, closed that gap.
There was a problem as well, right? There were 6 other people on the same bike.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I could foresee it. There was a point last year when it was clear that Norris was getting in the fastest car and Verstappen was going to fall back. There was definitely a chance to kind of whittle down that lead, and unfortunately Norris was kind of the weak link within that. He didn't. There were plenty of opportunities that were presented, and he either didn't or couldn't take them, whichever way you want to kind of look forward to it. So at the end of the day, he's a multiple race winner now, which if you'd said that at the beginning of last year, he would have been more than kind of taken your arm off.
No wins.
To say that. Yeah, it gone from Lando no wins to multiple wins, and we're talking about him in championship contention. So he has to be considered one of the favourites. The relationship those two of Norris and Piastri are going to have next year is going to be really exciting to see, because we saw a little glimpse of what it could be in Hungary with the whole kind of team order shebang. Multiply that into a season where let's put forward a world where McLaren is comfortably the fastest car and no one can touch them. They're first and second all the time. Who wins out in that situation? Because neither of them want to be finishing in second. Neither of them thinks they're a number 2 driver. Piastri wasn't always on top of his game last year, but I still rate him very highly. I've always been impressed. As soon as those kind of first McLaren upgrades came in 23, and McLaren vaulted from kind of the back where they started that year towards being front runners, I was really impressed by how easily Piastri adapted to that kind of thing, because it would be very easy for any kind of young guy to be given the fastest to second fastest car and be prone to be making errors and mistakes, because now you've kind of got these bigger results on the line. And he's never really done that. He's generally quite mistake free with what he does and has quite a cool head. I think the only question mark then developed last year was that kind of slight lack of pace compared to Norris. And again, he's one of those guys who, when he's on it, he is fantastic, and you can't beat him. You've got to look at something like when he won in Azerbaijan, clearly kind of like the best guy in the field that day. If he can multiply that across more races this season, now we forget he's still very young. This is only his third year we're coming into now, and again, he is also a race winner, pole sitter, all this sort of stuff as well. So he has the potential to continue improving, whereas Norris, we saw a lot of improvement, and now the question is is there even more to come from Lando comparative to Oscar in terms of growth. But yeah, this is probably the inter-team battle that I'm most kind of excited to see, because there is such a huge opportunity for this to kind of implode spectacularly. And McLaren are a bedrock for that in the past, with Hamilton, Alonso, with Senna, Prost.
Always leads back to Hamilton.
We should always be talking about Hamilton. So yeah, it's very hard for me to judge which one comes out on top of this, because the brain says Norris, but my heart is saying Piastri, and I don't think there's an eventuality of that I'm unhappy with. I think either of those guys winning a first championship this year would be, I'd be really happy to see.
It'd be awesome, yeah. Look, it comes down to only one thing. I think if we look at the 2024 season where Norris lagged, ideally, it was on 2 to 3 areas. The first was the starts. He was piss poor on that front. Lost a lot of points, around 70 plus points just on that. Then for him, I think the problem is when it comes to the mental aspect, when it comes to playing those games, that Max was able to do brilliantly when it comes to your racecraft and stuff like that. I think that's where Lando kind of lagged. That's the area where he'll have to work on. In terms of pace and performance, he's there. He's the benchmark in McLaren, in essence. For Oscar, I think in essence, he's a 10th or a couple of tenths behind Lando, at least in 2024. If he finds those couple of tenths, I think he'll be the benchmark at McLaren, honestly. Because for him, when it comes to the mentality and the poise and the racecraft, because look, that overtake on Leclerc at Baku was something. It was just brilliant. So it's basically two very, very different areas where they have to improve. And which one of them is able to do it better, I think that's where the balance goes. I don't think it's going to be one way or the other. It's quite straightforward. I think the 24 equation that we had in qualifying in 2024 between the two, I think it would narrow down a bit. I think the points gap would come down. But for Oscar, I think it's very clear if he gets those final couple of tenths, I think he'll be the McLaren representative. Because what happens is once he starts getting on a roll, I think there is, again, Lando has been very open about it, but it does appear that when it comes to the mental aspect, he's not as bulletproof as maybe the other guys are, and that can hurt you in a championship battle, especially if it comes from your own team. I'd pick Lando because I was just going through the junior categories and the way he's actually approached. He's won everything, and he's dominated everything. Other than Max, his junior record, except the F2 where he lost to George, he's been stellar. The reason why he's not really had one area where he's developed, and that area is the competition, because he's dominated in every series. He's not really seen that concept where similar cars and he faces competition. He hasn't had that kind of repulsion in terms of a similarly or maybe more talented driver pushing back. if he's able to improve on that, that's a title. That's a title winner in 2025. I think with a stamp on it. If he's not, it could even be Oscar. So yeah, it's very, very. I think it's going to be much closer. I think this one will be more tense. I think we might be heading towards a scenario where McLaren has to sit back and think that maybe this lineup is not your sustainable lineup for the future. So yeah, let's see.
I think it's just very quickly. It's definitely a lineup that Red Bull are going to be looking at with a lot of interest, I think, because if you've got all those question marks over Max and what they're doing there, if there is a sniff that either one of those drivers is unhappy there, and there's been talk of Norris going to Red Bull in the past, either replace. Yeah, I think if there's a situation where Max needs replacing because he's moved on or retires or whatever that kind of thing is just as well, they're taking a firm interest, and just the faintest bit whiff of either of them being unhappy there or the bit of friction between the two, they will kind of leverage it and want to get involved with that.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of the 2022 MotoGP season when Baghdad started winning after a while.
Yeah.
Was it Baghdad? I can't remember the name. Anyway, look, the thing for me is I think I want to see more from Piastri, if I'm honest. I was a little bit disappointed by his form towards the end of the season last year. Like, obviously there was some big highlights, Monza, Baku, but I kind of like, as the season progressed and as the car got to the front, I kind of expected, because of Piastri's youth, I expected his like curve of how much better he got to be a bit quicker, if that makes sense, and Norris is to be a lot slower. And there was points where Norris kind of, even one race to the next, you could see he had kind of learned something and changed something and did something. And there was still multiple flaws, but it was like, okay, well, he's coming from the biggest points deficit. Like, no one's ever gone higher than that in terms of turning around. Mm-hmm. He's in a team that has, like, basically wasn't a race-winning team until halfway through, well, quarter of the way through the season, and was making tons of mistakes and wouldn't back him after him kind of backing them. So I think there was a lot on top of him. And the way he improved, to me, kind of, I expected Piastri to be improving quicker. And that's why I kind of want to see more. Like, the thing is, we talked about the killer instinct thing of Piastri, and that's what Piastri has, that I think Norris just doesn't instinctively have, right? Mm-hmm. And when it comes to that killer instinct, it's an instinct. So it is something that's quite hard to just learn. Like, whether you can learn it is questionable completely. Yeah. Norris definitely is a faster driver. I think there's no question on that, just inherently a faster driver. Piastri might pick up that pace and get quicker, even though the head-to-head in qualifying was like 16-9 or something, 16-7, something like that. It was only like a tenth. It's not like it was a huge difference. So Piastri
head-to-head was 24, right?
Was it? Okay. I know it was some crazy, a real
disparity.
A washboard. Washboard? That's the abs. Not qualifying. Anyway, so it wasn't a huge difference in terms of just out and out pace though, right? But like, when we talk about that killer instinct, there were some signs of Norris learning that pretty much straight away, that he had to get that. And I think there was just too much to ask from him in the season, where no matter what happened, he was always going to look like he just didn't do enough. He was running against his own team. He was running against team mistakes. The starts, he did throw a lot of them away, but a lot of those starts as well, we also saw Piastri do badly. So there could be a question of just not having confidence in the clutch and the setup that McLaren were giving him as well. That could play into it. But like, when I think of his instincts in racing, I think one thing that kind of I keep coming back to is, look what happened in Austin and then how he reacted in Mexico. Like, we talk about not having that killer instinct, but he very quickly, in terms of a week, learned like, no, fuck you, Max. I'm going to throw it up, throw it around and go off the track if I need to. But he was then stuck in that unfortunate position of Max just went right then and upped the ante once again and basically went to throw him off track. And Norris was in the unenviable position of, well, I'm 60 points behind, so if we crash, he wins. So I can't, Whereas this year coming in now, if Max or Piastri tried that on him and he has a points lead, he could just go, yeah, fuck you, crash then. It's benefiting me. So exactly. I don't know. I think Piastri is definitely a top talent. It's just, I think Norris is a lot better than a lot of people want to rate him. And I'm not saying you guys, I know you guys rate him quite highly. I think he's a lot better. And I was really impressed by some of the the changes to his form over the season, and even how quick he got. Like, I mean, look at Singapore. He made some mistakes, sure, but like it was a dominant win. And if we're talking about like at that point before that race, everyone was like, Piastri next year is going to whitewash this guy. It's like, sure, okay, you could say that, but I don't see any evidence of it, because it's like, oh, well, he won that Singapore race in a rocket ship. It's like, well, then why wasn't Piastri second?
Yeah.
You know, same with Zandvoort. Oh, it's a rocket ship. Well, then why was Piastri fourth? You know, like,
exactly.
I have some questions around just how quick Piastri is, but I have no questions around his racecraft. So basically what I'm saying is I kind of agree with you, Casual. It'll be interesting to see which one of them can close which gap quicker.
Sorry, just to add on it, you've seen it with almost all these drivers. Max came into the sport, and I think the biggest eye-opener for me was going back and looking at 2016, 2017. There were legit weekends where it's basically Ricciardo and Max neck and neck. And a lot of times Max basically pummeling Ricciardo and being in a completely class of his own. You see that with Max. Leclerc comes in, he does the same thing. He stamps his authority. Lando came in his very first season, he out-qualified Carlos. And in the second season, I think he was better, even though the points did not show that. With Oscar, he's shown a progressive rise in performance, but he's not shown those, like, out of the blue, just he blows Lando out of the water. There aren't that many weekends where you can say that something like that happened. Probably Monaco, probably Baku, but again, we really don't know how Lando would have done in Baku, because the whole thing got fucked up.
If Lando had done a Hamilton there and showed up and just gone, well, if I had qualified better, you know.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I think I kind of take a step back when it comes to Oscar, and probably my biggest, you can say, critique of him. Yeah, let's see. If you have to pick, I think I'd still pick Lando. It's very close.
It's one last thing on it. It's going to be interesting because if McLaren have the fastest car, but it's very close between them and Ferrari, they've already won the constructors now. So it's going to be really interesting to see, like, if we're kind of a third of the way through the season.
It's basically who fucks up less in that case, honestly.
Yeah.
Two shittiest teams in terms of operations are going to fight it out. And I won't be surprised. I honestly won't be surprised if Max ends up winning the title and they are basically going to sit there with... Yeah.
If Ferrari and McLaren are the two fastest cars,
we are
and Red
basically
Bull's
going
third,
to blow our heads. And that's what is going to happen in 2025. Both of these guys are going to have the best car. Both of these teams, McLaren and Ferrari. And for some reason or the other, they will not back the lead driver. They'll keep basically picking strategies that screws their lead driver. And by the end of the season, we are looking at Max winning the championship. And again, like, how did it happen? Why did it happen? Because they followed the basics. Something that Ferrari and McLaren tend not to do often.
So, speaking of teams that should be performing better, I guess we're on to Aston real quick.
Who's
who's going to win in the driver lineup in Aston Martin this season?
Oh my God.
It's a tough one. I mean,
I'm not going to talk about Stroll. I give up. I just give up. Why is he here? I mean, that's the only question.
So, I guess maybe I'll summarize this and we'll see if we just all agree. Fernando Alonso is going to be far better than Stroll. Stroll's going to have 1 or 2 weekends where Fernando is at the blackjack table and just not bothered showing up until the 2026 car arrives. They're going to put fuck all development into 2025 other than just kind of checking that some boxes are off and that they kind of know that everything's correlating, so that when Lord Nui shows up, they can go, yeah, we checked it, it's all fine, don't worry about it. And then they're going to stroll on into 2026 and hopefully replace Stroll with someone else for 2026, but they won't, because there's the one chance that he has a title. That it?
Yeah, move on.
That's pretty much it. I mean, I will say, just very quickly,
if you say Stroll could win, I'll shoot you.
I will not say that, but I will say the opposite of that, because obviously last year we were meant to record a podcast about sort of unpopular opinions that unfortunately I couldn't turn up to, but my one was about Stroll. But it's that
no opinion is unpopular.
That's fair.
Okay.
Well, I want to put forward the opinion that I still I think it's feasible that Lawrence Stroll will drop Lance Stroll, because I maintain that Lawrence Stroll is a very wealthy man, and you don't become a wealthy man without making a lot of kind of hard decisions and choices. And at some point, even he has to realistically say,
And
if I
getting
want
a
this
new
team
son.
to be, get a new son, adopt Fernando Alonso legally. But, if he wants to be winning a championship, he has to be putting 2 top-line drivers in there, and unfortunately Lance Stroll is not there. I think Lance Stroll can be decent, and there have been flashes in the past. I'm thinking
he's
about
not the worst pay driver in history.
He's not, and I think I've discussed this on another podcast before. I think the issue you have is that if you consider mathematically you've got all these teams, and let's say you've got McLaren as the best team, and therefore logically they should have the first and second best drivers, and then Ferrari should have third and fourth, and so on and so forth down the grid. If we're saying Aston Martin is at that kind of fifth level, they should have the bottom end of the top 10 drivers, and Lance Stroll does not fit within that
bottom end of
remit.
the top 20.
No. If Lance Stroll was still circulate, if he'd spent all this time and he was at a Sauber or Haas or something like that, I don't think we would blink too much of an eye.
Yeah.
Because that's, he's more kind of in that kind of lower midfield range. I think, unfortunately, he gets put under a lot of spotlight from where he is. But equally, he doesn't do himself any favours because he kind of shies away from the media and doesn't engage with it. And I don't think that helps his cause at all. I think it'd be different if we saw a more kind of personable Ricciardo-esque side to his personality. I think a lot more people would warm to that.
He's getting hammered every weekend by one of the greatest drivers in F1 history. How can he be personable and have any kind of personality?
Yeah, but I think he doesn't help himself in terms of trying to get people on his side.
Yeah.
I said a while back to you, Casual, as well. Like I think Lawrence Stroll sees this as winning at all costs, and his winning at all costs is either his son is going to win a championship or his team is. So he's like, it's one or the other. And this talk about Max, I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to hire
Won't
Max.
happen.
No, I know, but if they do, and the Daily Mail is just inexplicably correct for once, when it's not being racist or fascist. If they are correct and he hires Max, I would not be surprised if it's Max and Alonso for 26, because realistically, the thing is, it's just a case
Everyone
of like,
should
if you
back up in that case, honestly.
it will be an amazing lineup though, wouldn't it? But like, if you're hiring Max Verstappen, right? Vettel and Alonso are at the ends of their careers, and you could feasibly say, well, he's brought those in to kind of train up his son for when the team is ready. But if you hire a Max Verstappen, that's saying, sorry, son, but you're not winning ever again, or for the first time, even. So, yeah, like if you're hiring Max Verstappen, I think in that case, Mobile's right. Like, Stroll is off to the new Aston Martin WEC team to try and win a championship there. Because if you want Stroll to win, you're not hiring Verstappen. Like, there's just no rhyme or reason to that.
I'm honestly more interested in how Aston Martin fares this season first, than what happens next season. Because
I think, like Jason says, I think we can speak at length. That's 90% of these teams, but Aston Martin, we all know it's kind of a write-off for next year. It's going to be more of what we saw last year. We're not going to get that kind of peak that we had in 2023. It's all being geared but towards 2026. The only interesting things to talk about Aston Martin is what is going on off the track with them. And I think the driver lineup is probably the most exciting part about that, because
sad part, honestly.
Sadly, it would be great to see more success from them on track. But they've got this Honda engine coming in. They've got Newey now. The next piece of the puzzle is putting the right kind of drivers in there. And they're going to break the bank to try and sign a big name, and it's a question of just which name that's going to be.
I just realised, if Alonso, after all of this, we go into 2026 and he's got a title-winning car for the first time in like 20 years, like a clear title-winning car, and Lawrence arrives and goes, "This is my new son, Max." It's like, oh my God.
That would be peak Alonso.
I think Alonso would just be like, "I'm burning the building down."
Yeah.
You've talked about burning bridges. I'm going to burn a building now. Yeah.
I doubt Max goes there, honestly. I think in that
Newey
case,
could
Aston Martin
overrule
finishes
it
the
in some
season
ways.
in 6th or 7th in the championship in that case, because they were nowhere last season. That would be even worse. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
Alonso
6th or
has
7th
said-
is realistic. Yeah.
Alonso has said in a podcast right out, like he was asked bluntly, will we see any better from you in 2025? And he was like, no, 2025 will be a season just to check things and prepare the new wind tunnel and facilities.
Yeah.
Where our full aim is 2026. Yeah. So if he's saying that, the team has obviously decided that, that's the plan. And I can see Newey coming in and saying, right, we're going to build this suspension or this piece or whatever, just to check that the wind tunnel and race track is kind of correlating and whatnot. I could see them having some upgrades that work just purely because Newey's like, we need to stress test this, check this is
and
working.
See the upgrades work actually.
Yeah, and kind of make sure, is this guy who says he's useful actually useful, or is he a moron? There'll be those kind of things. But other than that, I can't see them performing. Speaking of useless teams, Haas next, I guess.
Haas and Williams are left, right?
And RB.
RB,
yeah. Do we really need to talk about the junior team? It's basically just where they go to pick a new driver after one fucks up. That's essentially it.
So Haas, I think, by the way, Ollie Beerman, what's your take? I think this is probably, other than Kimi, he is probably the second most highly rated driver in terms of the upcoming drivers.
Can I just give my opinion, because it'll be very quick?
Yeah.
I think he beats Ocon because Ocon's French and useless, and I say this a lot to annoy you, but I also kind of start to believe it. And with Behrman, I am whelmed. Not overwhelmed, not underwhelmed, whelmed. I think he's a very capable driver. I don't think he's like a next Charles Leclerc or anything, though. I do think he would be a brilliant number 2 at Ferrari, and that's kind of where I see his career. That's all I have to say on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fair. Whelmed. Do I want to put out there? To my chagrin, I didn't get to see his race of Ferrari. I was flying in a plane at the time, probably over the circuit actually. So I could have just peeked out and had a look. But so I only really got to see kind of those little cameos for Haas towards the end of the year, which was decent enough. And he's clearly a talented young man, and we can jump. We've already spoken at length about how F2 is not necessarily or ever representative of kind of talent levels and how good actual drivers are. So he's better than what he's been able to show there, even though he did shine on occasion in that.
He got pole position with a bent steering wheel.
Yeah.
In Baku.
Yeah. I think he will at least match Ocon this year. I think Ocon is good, but I think if I seriously look at kind of the past few seasons, he is good but not great. And I think if I'm ever compiling a definitive list every year, Ocon is sitting in a kind of outside the top 10 at around that 11th 12th kind of barrier, where he is a solid operator who can score you points, but doesn't particularly get a lot of kind of standout moments to him. There was a couple last year. You've got to look at that race in Brazil. That aside, Gasly was, in my opinion, the better driver in that lineup. And I think even the year when he won that race in Hungary, there was Alonso was still kind of the better driver within that lineup and had kind of more eye-catching performances than what he could do. So Haas is a decent fit for him, and I think he can operate in that kind of, I guess, an equivalent talent level, as you could argue, like a Grosjean or something like that, in terms of a solid operator. But the Behrman's the one that's going to be worth keeping an eye on, and what his kind of level is in comparison to Ocon, because Ocon is a decent benchmark to kind of compare yourself against, because if you can beat that, you're at least a solid operator. If you're not beating that, maybe you're not quite that talent that we were hoping for.
Yeah.
But just to jump in real quick, just an important note. I didn't realize you can actually be whelmed.
I wondered what you were doing all that time.
You didn't know that?
No, I knew you could be overwhelmed or underwhelmed, but I've never heard
you could just be whelmed.
Yeah, it turns out that whelmed is like when you're kind of quickly buried or submerged in water. And then if you're overwhelmed, it's like when you succumb to being whelmed and drown.
Yeah.
And then underwhelmed is when you're standing in the still end, not the sparkling end, I guess.
Yes.
The pro.
Let's call it that.
Yeah. Anyway, so I am actually doing something tedious as well.
Yeah.
As checking whelmed. Continue.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be surprised if he beats Ocon. or is right on the level of the Frenchman, I think he probably gets swiftly promoted to a Ferrari. I think that would be very, very likely because, again, I rate him very highly in terms of the kind of weekends that he's pulled off, where he's. Look, when it comes to Formula 2, it's very hard to make a clear-cut judgment of how good the cars are, the field is, and everything. But look, if you're getting pole position with a bent wheel, that bent steering wheel, I mean that's something. Again, he has his circuits where he's brilliant. He's brilliant at Saudi, Jeddah, where he's quite good. He's quite good in Baku. He's quite good at Brazil as well, apparently. And I think it was very lucky of him that he actually got to race in Formula One in all three of those circuits, and he did well. I think if he's able to out-qualify Nico Hülkenberg straight out of, without any testing or anything, it shows that the talent and pace is there. Whether over a season, if he's able to out-qualify and beat Ocon, I think he should be promoted as soon as possible because look, you have your elite drivers and then there is one level below that. That's where your Carlos Sainz, Albon, probably Ocon, Gasly, and all these drivers lie. If you're beating them, you're basically one of the elite drivers, and you should really, just put them on a springboard, put him in one of the top cars. I'd be surprised if he does it in his very first season. There will be weekends where he'll probably have a dominant overall weekend, and I think again, Jeddah is going to be one of them. Baku is going to be another of them because he's quite good on those tracks. Overall, I think he's going to piss a lot of people off in terms of his racecraft because I see a lot of Max Verstappen in him. I still remember his race with I think it was Jack Doohan or Teo Porcher, where he was defending pretty much on worn out tires in Silverstone and just held on. And there were far too many cases of moving under braking, far too many of them. And that's the driver that should be in Formula 1 because he's ballsy in terms of this. And I think he pulled a move on Lewis as well in Brazil, did something similar. I want to see him be involved in these race battles, whether he outperforms his teammate, I'd be surprised. But overall, I think it's still kind of show that other than Kimi, he is probably the next good driver that is actually coming up. How does Haas fare, by the way?
It's hard to judge because I'm not sure where their kind of priorities lie. I'm tempted to say they're
scoring
going to focus
points.
For scoring points. So maybe they're good at recognizing an opportunity of when they need to kind of jump up the order a little bit. And I suppose if they're concentrating more on 25, that gives them a good opportunity to put a solid year under their hats, have another kind of decent constructors finishing and secure some more money for that. Then they can kind of work out where they go from there. It's hard to see them jumping higher or dropping lower than kind of the level they were at the end of last year.
They were around 5th and 6th, right? By the end of the season, 5th and 6th fastest. That's where the car was. After you have the top 4 teams, and then you have Haas, Alpine, Aston Martin to a certain extent. And if we are not expecting Aston Martin to do anything decent, and Haas basically has its rear end picked up from Ferrari, so it should be decently competitive. And this time around, they have 2 drivers that can actually score and contribute decently. And you have Ayo Komatsu, who is basically no bullshit. They should do well. Plus, the resources are coming in from Toyota and stuff. They should do well. Let's see. P5, P6 maybe.
It really depends on how hard the other teams go at 2025 because they could find themselves... the thing is, normally I would say probably not well because with their limited resources, they would have been focused 100% on 2026. But I think that, like you said, Ferrari, for example, are clearly going to try and push something for a title this year because, they're close enough that it's worth the push, I think. That could help Haas in that they'll get kind of upgraded parts from that push. So the upgraded suspension and that kind of thing, if the suspension works. So all of that in mind with the fact that they then don't have to put too much into aero and they could be testing this new partnership. If the other teams around them all kind of decide, fuck it, and throw in the towel for 2026, then Haas could have a really good season.
Yeah.
But if the other teams decide to kind of put more effort into 2025 because they know it'll help them with understanding for 2026 or whatever, then I think Haas could be, like the simple way of putting it is Haas in their current form until the Toyota stuff really ramps up should be the worst on the grid if everyone is performing at their best. Yeah. So they're a weird team in that their performance is really ultimately dependent on how everyone else does. Exactly. I know every team is kind of that way, but they are the most like that, if that makes sense, because they
had just 240 employees earlier, and apparently
that's what I mean. Their ceiling is lower than everyone else's.
Yeah,
so they're dependent on other people not hitting that ceiling more than any other team.
True. True. Yeah. What's the Williams? So Carlos Sainz versus Alex Albon. How do you see this faring out?
Well, first off, I'm just annoyed the fucking Colapinto's not in the seat. But anyway,
go for it. What do you think?
I think Albon's clearly a shitty driver, as are all British drivers. No, I don't know.
But he's Thai.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, when he's winning, he's British, though. It depends. That's how the British do things, you see. If you're losing, you're Scottish or
you
Northern
have a British
Ireland.
On the panel, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
It's not me.
We all used to be British at some point.
Yeah, apparently the entire world used to be.
Yeah. A third of the world, technically speaking. Look, I don't know. This is going to be a really interesting one because we know how good Sainz is, right? We have an absolute marker for how good Sainz is. Obviously, Sainz has to go now and learn kind of a new team and stuff, but Sainz has been incredibly adaptable over his whole career, so I don't really see that as being an issue, at least not after 5 or 6 races anyway, maybe for the first few. But like, Sainz is a really solid benchmark because Sainz should have been absolutely whitewashed by Charles Leclerc because we know how good Charles Leclerc is. And even though he was like kind of beaten by Charles Leclerc, it wasn't like it was an overall thrashing to the extent where you'd think, okay, Sainz is a terrible driver. Like Sainz held his own. He beat Leclerc at a few occasions. He did a really solid job in Ferrari, and I think that's one of the reasons why we kind of joke about the Hamilton thing, which is they had a really solid driver there. Albon is the one where I don't know how good Albon is in reality because I think he's a very good driver, but when he was in the pressure cooker, he lost comprehensively to Verstappen. But the problem is that's a hard benchmark to kind of navigate. That's my point. So that's hard to navigate. And then he's up against, Sargent and Latifi, and he destroys them, but so does everyone, So it was kind of with George Russell as well. It was like, how good is George really? And then he's up against Franco, and Franco held his own against him. So does that say that Franco's really, really good, or that Albon's actually not that great? I think it's going to be an interesting season because we know where Sainz is. So if Albon is beating Sainz or holding his own against Sainz, then I think, right, Albon is a very, very capable driver. If Sainz comes in and destroys him, then it's, maybe it was just kind of, the car was better than we thought over some of that time, and obviously Latifi and Sargent are shit. So I think that it's one team lineup that's going to be interesting for me because now we have a proper benchmark.
Yeah, there's not going to be much friction either. It's basically they're fighting for scraps. You can't really expect much from Williams at this stage, to be honest. By the way, just to sum it up, which one are you picking out of Carlos and Alex? Finally.
Albon and Sainz, you mean? And Carlos, sorry.
Yeah, Carlos and Alex.
I thought you said Albon and Alex, and I was like, what? Sainz. I think Sainz wins out over the course of the season.
Yeah. Mobile?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, again, Jason's kind of voiced a lot of the kind of internal notes I already kind of thought on the subject. I think I was really excited when Albon joined Williams because I'd seen flashes of promise. I think in particular when he replaced Gasly in that Red Bull in what was it 2019?
Yeah.
And he was kind of then in this dependable kind of top 6 finisher, maybe higher in that second half of the season. That kind of really highlighted that was what Red Bull needed at the time was just a capable pair of hands to be bringing in the points and making the best of advance of the situation he was in, which unfortunately then did not translate across to 2020, which was a real shame. But when Russell left and Albon came in instead, I was really happy with that because, it was clear to me this guy's talented, he's fast, and Williams is a great environment for people to kind of improve themselves and build up again. But like Jason says, there's always been a question mark because of those kind of pairings he's had of Latifi and of Sargent. And then when Colapinto came in last year, you're adding about another 5 question marks onto the end of that question mark, because you were, as good as he was kind of performing in what has been an increasingly a lower midfield kind of operation, was he overperforming with what he had with the car? Was he matching the expectations, or was he underperforming? You had no way of really kind of telling because of that level he was up against. And then Colapinto comes in and immediately smashes out the park with no kind of expectation around it. Even from my perspective, had no expectation on Colapinto. I thought this is as good a chance. He was the reserve driver. Let's get him blooded in and used to racing experience, but didn't expect him to kind of shine in the way he did. And maybe Alex didn't either. It's raised a lot more kind of question marks about the level where Alex is at, because again, 12 months previously, he was being discussed with, links to like a Ferrari or something like that as a potential driver there. And now I'm in the position now where if I had my choice of drivers coming into this season, I would much rather have had Sainz and Colapinto than Alex there based on what we've seen.
Yeah.
Sainz is an enormous signing. I'm desperately trying to scroll through in my mind of kind of the last time Williams have signed a driver, not just a big name, but someone kind of still within their peak of F1. In recent, let's say recent, 10 years ago,
probably.
He was a young driver.
He was a rookie and kind of came up as a junior. You've got names like Barrichello and Massa, very good race winner drivers, but were definitely towards, they were past their prime. So I think you're scrolling even back to the 90s and maybe earlier for the last time we had someone who was...
Ralf Schumacher, would you consider him?
Again, Ralf Schumacher was a promising talent, but he wasn't a race winner when he joined Williams. Names like Montoya, very good, but he was a rookie, came up with it as well. So
early 2000s, is there anybody?
That's what I'm now back into the 90s
Nick
in my mind.
Was not a race winner.
Webber was highly... I guess you could argue Webber in terms of how highly rated he was at the time. But
I hear that Senna fellow was good in the early 90s.
I mean, maybe. I think that genuinely, maybe Senna, maybe the last time we had such a big race-winning name with pedigree and wasn't at the tail end of their career. So, I'm not gonna. There's no bones about it. I think Williams have already said
Mansell. They basically won the title and retired as well.
Yeah,
shit. Yeah, true.
Yeah, Williams have kind of already said they're not really paying attention to 25 and they're looking ahead to 26. So my expectations are reasonably low. And
dog shit.
Yeah, it's going to be more or less kind of what we saw last year, which good in a way that they're concentrating on not having such a peaky car and having something more all round. But it would just be nice to have more points on the board, really. That's all I'd like to see. So yeah, I think in terms of the head-to-head, I favour Sainz. Where Albon is in relation to that is going to hugely depend what happens to his career next. Because if he's a closer match, then it was just just flash in the pan. That's just the way the end of last season fell, and it's how it is. If he's struggling compared to Carlos, and especially Carlos coming into a new environment as well, then we need to start having debates about what Alex does next and who's kind of in line for a future role within that team.
Yeah.
I mean, if Alex does beat Sainz, that's going to be a huge...
That's a huge feather in his cap. After Max, that's the best teammate he's ever had. So the comparison there is going to be huge. It's a make or break season for him.
He had Daniel Kvyat as well.
Before Max... after Max stole his seat, his girlfriend and his life.
Yeah. Kind of. By the way, the head-to-head between Colapinto and Alex last season was, in qualifying, it was 7-2 in favor of Alex. So it did appear that... So what happened was at the start of it...
What was the race head-to-head, though?
I'm not... I don't think they finished many races, to be honest. They crashed many times.
No, because I was just going to say, the thing about qualifying, and I said this about Hamilton a lot last year, qualifying tells you a lot about who's more comfortable with the car. Because if you're like Hamilton and Russell were close enough in race pace quite a lot of the year, and that tells you like Hamilton's not completely washed. Always goes back to Hamilton. Whereas qualifying is like, I just can't get on top of the car, or I'm not comfortable, and I'm going to defend Colapinto to the bitter fucking end here.
The stats here I have is that it was 4 apiece between the two in terms of both finishing races. So
they finished 8 races. I don't think they finished 8 races.
Let me check.
Because I remember.
You just
Alex...
hate South Americans. That's all this is about.
Neither of them finished in Sao Paulo. Well, I think Colapinto didn't. What is it? Albon didn't even start the race. Albon didn't even start the race that day, and then the rest of it is 4 apiece.
Yeah.
This team, by the way, accumulated around $13.5 million worth of damages.
Yeah.
Half of the grid is not even paid that much. They kind of damaged it put together. But yeah, it did appear that Albon was a bit, you can say, rattled when Colapinto came into the team. But as I think he recalibrated and ultimately found his sweet spot. Again, Colapinto is good, but I think Alex kind of got shat on a bit too much. It did appear that maybe the gap was not too big and he was still doing a decent enough job.
Yeah.
I'd expect Carlos to beat Alex because of the kind of season he had in 2024 against Leclerc and the kind of praise he's getting from James, which kind of shows, I mean, he's basically away from popping a ring in front of him right now. That's the kind of the way he's actually talked about him. I think we might see Williams becoming a Carlos Sainz team, as in the whole team kind of, forms around him and he becomes the de facto leader. Again, it depends on what kind of commitment he has with the team. Yeah, probably the first season will be close. By the next season, we might see Carlos starting to stretch a bit further. That's it. But yeah, let's see. I'm slightly worried where Williams would be this season because look, 13.5 million if you're losing that much of that kind of money from that's basically going from the development bracket, right? So you really don't have much to put into it. But yeah, let's see where it goes.
Just to cap off, then I guess we should touch on it. Just RB, I don't care how the team's going to do because it's never fight for.
I have a bold prediction.
Oh God!
After I think 8 or 9 races, I think Hadjar is replaced by Arvid Lindblad.
And Hadjar goes into RB or Red Bull or just gone?
Gone. Done.
Oh really?
Done. Yeah.
God, you're such a racist.
Either Hadjar or Yuki, one of them, because the way Helmut Marko is pushing Lindblad, apparently he forced him to go and get the super license as quickly as possible. So he's really pushing him. I think they are also starting to see, look, the signs are there. I don't think Max sticks around for too long. And they want to have their own driver ultimately at least decently ready to maybe take over in the future. So they're going to push him as early as possible. And I won't be surprised if Lindblad, MP Motorsport was a strong team last season. I think Hadjar race for them only. And if Lindblad ends up winning a couple of races in the first 4 or 5, they're basically going to just pick him up and just put him in Formula 1. They're not going to waste their time. It doesn't make any sense either. And it's basically Red Bull way of doing things.
I think the only issue there is because they seem like absolutely intent on taking Honda's money to the bitter end. Maybe it's less about the money and more about what Honda kind of got them to achieve.
Yeah.
Maybe they're kind of like, look, we'll keep Tsunoda until the partnership ends. Like it ends with us, Terrible movie. So I don't know. The only thing there is, I think in that situation, like if Hadjar is beating Tsunoda,
he won't, right?
And they don't.
In the first 9 races, if he does, then Yuki's gone.
But like,
I won't be surprised.
Do you not think at that point they maybe like? I guess it depends on what Liam's doing, right? There's all these moving parts.
Oh yeah.
So like, if Liam's falling apart, then obviously Hadjar gets the call up, and that opens up then for Lindblad to come in straight away.
Does it make sense? Honestly, they've reached a point where they need a future Max Verstappen. Neither Liam is going to be that guy, neither Isaac is going to be that guy. Yuki is done. in that case, this is the next guy in line, and he is doing decently well. I think he's dominating Formula Oceania right now, but that series it's for kids. Doesn't really make much sense.
It's close to Formula One. I've heard Formula
for kids. Yeah. So just put him here and let's see how he develops. And luckily for them, they have an RB team to get all these things done. They don't have to just push him into the key team. So let's see.
Yeah, it's difficult to get excited about RB for next year because you can make an argument that neither of those drivers should really be there. In the way things have fallen. I don't think Yuki should have even been in there last year. And that's not to denigrate the work he does because he's clearly a very talented guy, but they've been quite adamant since so long ago that he was never going to get into Red Bull. And the purpose of that team is you work out who you're going to put in Red Bull and who gets kind of chucked in the scrap heap. And, last year it was clear they wanted Ricciardo or they wanted Lawson. Tsunoda was not an option for that as well. So for me, they missed a trick by not having Lawson to bed in for a whole year and also compare against, Ricciardo for that as well. So they've got the best kind of barometer of which of those guys they wanted to pick because Tsunoda was never going to get it.
Yeah.
What he does this year, it's going to be really interesting to see how well he goes because he's got to pick himself up now. Now, yes, it was always unlikely, but now it's definitively kind of said you're not going to Red Bull. That promotion is not happening for you. It's can he, elevate himself to a level where he can prove those guys wrong and put himself in the shop window somewhere else. If the shop window is interesting because his name's been spoken in connection to Aston Martin because of the Honda links. I worry that that's the only one he's really being mentioned in connection to
Cadillac.
Cadillac could be one as well. It depends. He's been decent, but never
mind-blowing.
He's not been mind-blowing. He's not been outstanding. And then you've got Hajar as well, who, again, I didn't see too much of him in the junior formula. I can only judge from what I've seen when he was in free practice, and he didn't particularly dazzle then. But then you don't get the best sense of where drivers are in kind of modern free practice because there's all these different programs they're running and stuff like that. So their pace is never representative of kind of where they're going. But he, in a way, we said, like I said earlier, Doohan kind of is in place because of the way the dominoes have fallen, and Hajar is the same because Perez was so awful that they had to eject him and then they had to move Lawson across. That's how he's kind of found his way in. And again, this is his opportunity and he's got to make the most of it. And I hope that he can, go out there and be exciting and not just kind of plod around dependently and just be, Nick De Vries Mark II coming into the sport. Anytime a young guy comes in, you want to hope that they can, do their best and show themselves off. But like you say, Lindblad is waiting in the wings, and it's a question of when, not if, they try to move him into the big leagues. Yeah, unfortunately for RB this year, it's mostly just kind of about what they do with their drivers and where those drivers go rather than anything in particular they do.
It's so weird, right? Because last season they started the season as the 5th best team. Yuki was consistently fighting for points, and since then it's just gone downwards. But again, it's basically the same thing that happened to Red Bull as well. They've also regressed a lot. Weird. Let's see.
Okay.
Cool. We're done with all 10 teams. I hope we've not missed anyone. If we have, maybe they weren't that important.
Cadillac. Okay, so let's just quickly, just to wrap this off, predictions for constructor and let's just keep it simple. Constructors and drivers championship winner for the year. I'll kick it off you on. I'm going to say that it's going to be...
Lando Norris you're going to say, right?
I was, but now I'm not going to. I'm going to say it's going to be George Russell at Mercedes with Antonelli in second, and therefore Mercedes win the constructors.
I want to go for I'm going to say
sensible
McLaren
take.
for constructors again, and I'm going to pick Leclerc for the drivers.
So you think McLaren constructors, Leclerc? That will be a fun
imagine
season.
if Leclerc is the one who.
I think it's between McLaren and Ferrari, but
Yeah.
if you're ranking one of those, it's Leclerc, then Norris, then Piastri, then Hamilton at the bottom of that pile, and that's going to make the difference for constructors, I think.
Such a racist.
Yeah. I think Max wins the title.
I was
It's perfectly reasonable.
I was flicking between Norris and Verstappen, and then I went, fuck it, nah, George. Sorry.
Yeah. Constructors, I think McLaren.
Okay.
Very
All right,
sensible
so-
takes.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that's it then. Thank you everyone for watching. If you haven't already, please do go to the description below and unsubscribe from mobiles and come to. No, I'm joking. Please, please do go and subscribe to mobile. And if you're here, fucking subscribe to us as well, you lazy bastard.
By the way, if you're one
Jesus.
of
He's talking again.
keep quiet. If you're one of mobile subscribers, consider subscribing us as well.
No, that was not worth the wait. Thank you, everybody.
Hey,
You can-
maybe we get at least 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever number.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Thanks for watching. Follow us on X. Whatever.
Or-
Comment below if you
or
think
don't.
we're racist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye. Oh, thanks, mobile.